The city was destroyed. Cars were smashed into trash everywhere, bullets and smoke, as if everything here had suffered a meteorite crash. In that destroyed car sat a man, the silhouette of whom looked like a teenager or student. The salon, like everything around, was destroyed. Devastation was sown everywhere. Everything resembled an apocalypse. Our hero's name was Perry, and as it turned out, he was a student of the history department, which could be proven by his student card. His hands began to show signs of life. They moved, which means that he will wake up soon. So his eyes opened. He obviously didn't understand anything that was going on around him, how he ended up here. Everything was a mystery to him. The following picture lined up before his eyes, the broken glass of the car in which he was sitting. He began to look around. What was happening here? How he got here? And most importantly, why all these questions were circling in his foggy head. This is a sign of the apocalypse. The dead filled the cities, which caused the devastation. The city was empty, since the dead evicted the people. Zombies for our hero were commonplace. He did not see anything unique in them. He was not even afraid of them. He understood that he had ended up here completely by accident. He had no memory of the fact that he suddenly fell asleep in the car, and there were crowds of dead people in front of him. The student began to suspect the one who could have mocked him earlier, and it was she who pushed him into this car. Suddenly, he denied everything. In his memory, that offender threw him into trouble with a weapon. Suddenly, he decided to look back at the back seats to make sure he didn't have a weapon. As expected, on the back seats lay a blade in a sheath, which the offender left for our student for self-defense. This sword was not sharpened, which seemed strange to Perry, since during the apocalypse there should not have been any unsharpened weapons. Moreover, the sword even turned out to be familiar to our hero, as if he could have fought with it before, and this suggests that the blade is exactly the weapon that his offender threw to him. The sound of gunfire sounded outside the car, and it scared Perry to the point where his jaw dropped. He decided to get out of the car the fastest way possible, knock down the door, and prepare to protect himself from the shots, since they could soon be aimed at him. The student is well versed in weapons, but one thing is strange, how he realized that the shots were coming from an old rifle. In the midst of the devastation, cold monsters wandered, who had already died, but continued to annoy with their presence. In the direction of the shots, there was a large attack of the dead. It was not for nothing that they were fired upon. So one of the creatures got what he deserved. One bullet deprived him of part of his head and his second life. It turns out that the police were evacuating and firing at the monsters to protect them and take them to a safe place. The captain asked the lieutenant to report on the situation, and she said that the evacuation was in full swing. But the situation was not so colorful. The cartridges were running out, and soon it would be impossible to defend ourselves. The captain understood that the situation was heating up. There were more and more zombies and less equipment. Perry sat behind the cover and looked at all the details of the situation. Everything was very strange for him. Who is our student really? Why does modern weapons and police uniforms seem old to him? As if a minute ago he was in a completely different time. The zombies were overwhelming in their numbers. Sooner or later their volume would absorb the police, which Perry understood well. He assessed the situation in such a way that it was beneficial for him, but he could not help but save them. There were many contradictions in his head, but he could not think for long. That's all. The last cartridges were exhausted. There were more and more monsters, which means that death overtook them at the most inconvenient moment. The captain was depressed. His subordinate had spent his last ammunition. They had no choice but to die a brave death, like the Vikings. Suddenly, he shouted loudly to his lieutenant to voice a new order. At least one piece of good news is that the evacuation of people was successful and everyone is safe. Now the captain is determined, the order has been given, and they can sacrifice themselves in order to protect civilians. He ordered Lieutenant Gloria to provide pistol fire support while everyone else grabbed their knives and charged at the zombies with all their fury. Everyone could envy their fearlessness. They went to certain death. Now the Valkyries will send them to a paradise for warriors. Gloria fired at the dead, providing support to her employees behind her. She finally began to understand that all her comrades would die and she would be left alone with the crowd of the dead. For her, it was real horror. The streets were filled with the dead. Her comrades turned out to be food, and there was nowhere to run. Everything was terrible. There is only one cartridge left in the magazine. There are tens and hundreds of times more zombies. All that remains is to finish off yourself so as not to become a wandering dead. Initially, the battle was not equal. Even if they killed 2 dead men with 1 cartridge, there would not be enough equipment. They were all human once upon a time, but now they're just sacks of rotten meat out to kill. Gloria could not allow herself to become infected and become one of them and eat people. She had already put the barrel to her temple. It was unlikely that anyone would help her. Gloria was left alone with death, which was still standing nearby. Still, apparently our hero decided to help, even if it might have been too late. He did not stand aside. He attracted attention well. Even the dead paid attention to him, and Gloria removed her finger from the trigger. Now our heroine was afraid that someone had not evacuated, that he was acting recklessly. Perry took over all the zombies. What caused them such aggression? Gloria had already decided to die. Nothing could interfere with her decision. But death turned away from her and left completely. But suddenly she realized that she was afraid for him in vain. He probably showed her a new level of strength that she had not seen before. Everything turned out to be true. He easily puts the heads of these creatures on the asphalt with just a blunt sword. He was not going to retreat. Every step he took brought many deaths of the dead, which could not mean anything bad. Perry did incredible things. He was definitely not an ordinary student. Even a military man was not capable of this. He was probably out of his time now. Gloria couldn't believe that she was an ordinary person. Her jaw dropped and her eyes became wider. She looked at all this with complete misunderstanding. The corpses fell onto the asphalt. Previously, she thought that death was inevitable, but now the monsters were destined to die. She understood that even the fighters of the elite squad had difficulty fighting with two, and an ordinary student could cope with hundreds alone. He chopped off the heads of these dead men over and over again. They could not even see the silhouette of their enemy. Gloria could not understand who he was, how he fought like that, and how much power he had in his hands. Perry cast his sharp gaze, which cut as well as his blade. The gaze pierced her. There was boundless rage and a desire to kill, as if she were his next victim. While he was thinking about the benefits of protecting the police, only Gloria remained. Once upon a time, he could have saved them, but the desire for profit killed everyone else, even if it was possible to save everyone. Our hero only needed a blade from the police, since his sword was poorly sharpened, and he thanked him for that. Suddenly, he decided to use long-range combat against zombies. Even a thrown knife would be stronger and faster than a bullet. The dead man could not expect such a force of the throw. The blade would pierce him through or send him into a long flight any minute now. Even the non-intelligent dead man understood by instinct that his death could not be avoided, since everything told him that his opponent was too strong for him. Perry brings a lot of pain to zombies. His agility is amazing, like a butterfly fluttering gracefully on the battlefield, avoiding every attack. He effectively deals with enemies. His mobility is too great for anyone to keep up with him. Still, he still needs the knife. He grabs it in order to increase the need for the blade to the maximum and kill many more dead people with his blade. The cost of the knife is justified. With a couple of swings, the heads of many dead people flew off. Everyone got what they deserved. Even wielding a blunt sword like blades that cut steel is proof that it doesn't matter what kind of sword it is. What matters is who holds the hilt. Our heroine's legs gave way and she fell to her knees as the surprise put such pressure on her. The rage shining in the eyes of the dead began to fade. Perry snuffed out that fire, their desire to kill extinguished by the influence of our hero. For him, it was as if he had already seen it all. He justified their weakness by the fact that they seemed to have only recently become infected. Gloria did not consider them weak. She was more amazed by his strength, since she and all her comrades spent all the ammunition, but suffered heavy losses. She was still kneeling in shock. Perry finally decided to look at her, which she was very surprised by. The policewoman rose from her knees and reported on her rank and purpose. Perry conducted a professional dialogue with her and asked her to report all the information to him, along with the location. She listened to his requests and continued to remain silent, because she did not fully understand who he was. She was asked to report on everything, but she just asks many other questions about how she was even hired for such a job if she is so emotional. The mysterious student nevertheless decided to give a helping hand to his new partner so that she could rise. She thanked him for saving her, but she was haunted by who he was and where he got so much power from. Gloria did not understand what kind of support our hero was talking about. At this time, he seemed strange to them, even if he spoke business language. He also did not understand why she asked such a question, since supporting him is a healthy decision. Then she decided to show our hero to her place, since she is a police officer, and besides, she showed him her ID. She was a senior lieutenant and a police officer in this city, and the ID did not appear to be fake. Even an ordinary ID greatly surprised our ordinary student. His gaze was full of distrust, since, in his opinion, no one has been using such identification for a long time. How long ago they were abandoned and why they are used here. The uniform was also not the same as before or in the future from which our Perry came. He looked to the side again. Everything around him was the same as before, old, something that had not been used for a long time. He had already seen the apocalypse before, and it was exactly the same. Besides, the zombies were just like at the beginning of the disaster, and there were not a single strong ones. To Gloria, Perry's behavior seemed strange, but suddenly he asked for the year, month, and day, which indicated his suspicion that he was out of time. She, too, was confused by such a strange question. Or rather, she did not understand why he, having such power, was asking about time. The guesses turned out to be true. He tried to pretend that everything was normal, but he understood that he had returned 10 years ago, when the apocalypse had just begun. Yet he was not just a student. This day was a real coincidence. A hail of destructive meteorites, a zombie infestation, and an overall apocalypse. The virus infected more than half of the population, but was defeated after a while. But this does not mean that all bad weather is over. Extraterrestrial technologies suddenly appeared, which created a number of evolutionary zones. These technologies allowed humanity to evolve, but unlike everyone else, Perry did not receive abilities, but only physical strength. But one thing was revealed only now. Going back in time 10 years ago was his ability. It was as if fate itself gave him such strength, since he was able to get to the beginning of the apocalypse in order to help the remaining people with his knowledge. He clenched his fingers into a fist. Now he decides the fates of all these people, since the previous powers were with him. Perry had power, knowledge, and strength that everyone else would have a very long time to achieve. Suddenly, Gloria did not let the student from the future finish his sentence and pointed out something more important to him. An emerald glow reigned in the sky, the beauty of which she had never seen before even in the Arctic. So everything that he predicted began. Zones of evolution began to appear, and their green glow was a consequence of a small amount of time. This zone should be one of the first, and it was also the only one in Asia, so they had better hurry up so as not to be late. She considered this radiance very beautiful, but before she had time to express her thoughts, Perry began to tell her rank. But suddenly he told our Gloria something that he could not have known at all. But he knew that she was also a second-year student. Only now he decided to get to know her better and tell her about himself. She was infinitely surprised that he was a student with such and such abilities, but she no longer trusted him, as if he was hiding something. Suddenly, she asked him to show his student ID, which, in her opinion, would refute all his words. He pointed out that the ticket was in his car, which would make people believe him less, since on the surface it was a real lie. As expected, she began to trust him even less, since he too clearly refused to show his student ID. The image of a sophomore in her eyes was completely different, since you rarely see a student driving, with a weapon and with such and such strength. She pointed her finger at him and told him that he was not a student at all, but she was partly right, since you are unlikely to meet such students of the future. Gloria was sure that he was a high-ranking military man who had come on a secret mission, but all her confidence disappeared in an instant, since he still showed this ill-fated student card. Now she had no words. She could not believe her eyes, since she was sure that they were lying to her. He snatched the ticket from her hands and pointed out that time was tight and it was worth hurrying. Gloria was completely humiliated in front of him, but he was not interested in this. It was important for him to get out of here, and he decided to find out if they had a car in which he and the team were supposed to come here. Still, he approached the car and began to take his seat to head to the evolution zone. Even here he makes her worry, since he is going to move out alone and leave Gloria all alone. She was not happy with this decision, since it was her car, and she could not go back without it. Perry points out to her that the northern area of the city, where he is just going, can be very dangerous, since there are a large number of infected people there, and everything follows that it is better for her to stay, because everything around has been cleared of zombies. The police did not understand why an ordinary student would need to go to the place of infection, what attracted him there so much. She suspected him that the ticket was a cover, and he was an elite military man. She even came to terms with the fact that he didn't want to admit it. Although she was wrong, he was definitely not an ordinary student. She is sure that she found a reproach for going with him, but no matter how it is, he will probably find a reason himself or refuse, no matter who she is. The sergeant constantly points out his rank and points out that she must go with him. Otherwise, there is no other way. All her confidence instantly evaporated when he said goodbye and closed the window without even listening to her completely. He is good at humiliating people. Even power in a police uniform is no match for him. He was indifferent to everything she told him. He was silent, and this greatly unsettled Gloria. Suddenly, she had hopes that she could still go with him, since Perry had the courage to open the window for her. It turns out that he doesn't know how to drive this car, which is exactly what our heroine should be able to do. It's not for nothing that she is the owner of the car. So they were already on their way. No one knows why, of course, those showdowns were necessary, but our beauty in a police uniform was driving. She became more and more convinced that an important person, since he did not even have to sit at the helm, his subordinates would do everything for him. She fixed her evil gaze on him, Her cunning was revealed only by her physiognomy. She felt as if she had revealed his every secret. In response to her insidious gaze, Perry looked into her eyes with complete composure and indifference, the kind of pressure only he could exert, similar to the pressure at the bottom of the oceans. She felt this cold and could have felt it on the other side of the world. She was literally covered in frost herself while she was sitting nearby. She was embarrassed by the fact that he was constantly staring at her. Even when she tried to cast an inconspicuous glance, his eyes were already drilling new holes. Each collision of glances chilled her to the point of trembling, whether it was a monster looking at her or the entire salon was in his eyes. But suddenly, this strange silence stopped when Perry ordered her to stop. The car stopped, but why does he suddenly need to stop if they so urgently need to arrive in time to create a zone? Have they really arrived? Only our hero knows for what purpose they can leave halfway. Apparently, his mercy has ended. Either he finds it hard to bear the insidious glances on himself, or he is worried about the fragile beauty and wants to take care of her safety. She was terribly afraid of him. Every word instilled in her a hefty fear that she could not control. He took the steering wheel because during such a period of time, watching her, our student from the future learned to drive a car, which Gloria did not believe. The student understood that at this speed they could be late and they should hurry up, the sooner the better. Gloria was confused because she didn't understand where they might be late. Earlier, he also pointed out that there was quite a bit of time. Before she had time to get an answer to her question, our hero set off at full speed towards his goal, even if there were no obstacles in front of him. The speed with which he was driving was amazing. The air around him was heating up from the fact that he was rushing. It was now clear that he was in a hurry to the northern part of the city. You can't believe this the first time. He drove better than the masters who have been driving for decades, and he literally learned to drive the car just a second ago, but it was as if he was already speaking the same language with it. The city was already on the horizon. Being late is not about our hero. He will arrive at his destination in the shortest possible time. The speed caused the leaves to fall down. The wind remained behind and did not give any competition to the car driven by an ordinary student. Still, there was still some ammunition, which Gloria is now using and replenishing her magazine. She regretted that she and the team could not get through to the car with the equipment. Then they would all be able to survive. Meanwhile, there were more zombies near the city, and Perry effectively crushed them with the power of this machine. She can't even collect the cartridges before Perry runs over another dead man with his own pleasure. He assessed the situation well and also understood well that with every meter he traveled, it became more and more dangerous. Now Gloria treated our hero with respect, even putting him above herself, only because she suspected him. The police decided to find out why he was heading to the northern region, whether his parents really stayed there. But his answer was very simple. He had lost his parents a long time ago and could not return them. She probably felt guilty for what she said. But you can't blame her, because she is in no way guilty of this. Still, she told the reason for their stop and why they decided to evacuate them. But their initial task was to explore the northern region. But along the way, they met people and priorities changed. The glow appeared 2 hours after the virus appeared. The authorities sensed something was wrong and decided to send people on reconnaissance, and they turned out to be our police team. Previously, he did not have time to get into the evolution zone, but now he must do so. Then he became interested in the time, and he decided to ask Gloria to find out how many moments they had left, so as not to be late. There was no signal, but the time was accurate, which seemed strange to our beauty. Time was running out. Only 10 minutes and a few kilometers would separate them from the zone. According to his memory, the zone should appear at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Suddenly, Perry makes the quickest decision of the day and thinks about changing his route to shorten the distance and get to the north of the area faster. Each time he gave food for thought to our heroine, she could not understand what route he could be talking about, since one could expect everything in the world from such a madman. As expected, he makes a move with his knight. No one could have expected this. He turns the steering wheel, and this sharpness proves that the route has already changed. He intends so seriously that he thinks in an instant his decisions are lightning fast. In order to achieve his goal, he calculates 10 steps in advance. There was something in front of the car that made the heart beat faster. The adrenaline rushed out, and the skin was covered with goosebumps. The new route was occupied by monsters that could greatly slow down travel into the zone. She understood that zombies could interfere with them, but Perry thought faster. He remembered the machine gun that stood on the roof, and it would be the key to entering the zone. Suddenly, she calmed down. She finally realized that she could rely on an ordinary student from the future, since he knew what to do. But fear did not leave her even now. She wanted her thoughts not to come true. But all the craziest things already lie in the mind of our hero. So they needed a machine gun. They showered the dead with a hail of lead. Each one became like a sieve. They could not expect such precipitation, and Perry makes their worst nightmares come true. Everyone is already jealous of such shooting. Each bullet claimed many lives. He did not leave them even a chance to survive. Now no one could interfere with their path. All the monsters fell down and became level with the asphalt, becoming its covering. Gloria couldn't believe her eyes. She hadn't hit a single monster the whole time. The road was perfectly clear and no one stood in the way. In order to achieve maximum speed, Perry ordered her not to control the steering wheel, only to press the gas to the floor. Her look said it all. She was afraid of such madness, but she understood that she could trust this student. Perry knew that there would be a turn ahead, but still asked not to stop and not to steer. Yet he was not so stupid as to miss such a detail of the plan. Meanwhile, the stone in the sky shone stronger and stronger. The sky was painted an emerald color. The zone should appear any minute. The city was covered in a light green fog, as if the matrix had malfunctioned, and a code of green numbers appeared around on a black screen. Our heroes were almost in time for the zone to appear. They literally flew into its boundaries so as not to be late. The green haze around the car was a consequence of the fact that our friends were in time. Now all possibilities are open for Perry. The collision with the surface turned out to be not at all gentle. The car was initially very battered, and now it will not be easy to get it back on its wheels. Fortunately, the passengers were alive, but the sand that appeared in the middle of the city softened the landing, and our heroes survived. Perry outdid himself. They arrived right at the creation of the zone, yet Perry's short route paid off completely. Gloria could not believe that the northern region had completely become a desert. Everything around was incredibly strange. The student was rejoicing that they were on time, as if he already knew in advance the time of creation of the zone. But Gloria did not understand this, since she could not even think that Perry knew the future 10 years in advance. Everything around was as in Perry's imagination, as if he saw what he expected, but Gloria herself was inspired by what she saw. But it's true that in Asia, in the northern part of the city, Sphinx statues and ancient pyramids appeared. It's not for nothing that the desert appeared here. She definitely suspected something was wrong. Everything around was incredibly strange, and Perry calmly stood and looked at it, as if he knew it all in advance. Here they are, manifestations of the zone. Everything, like a matrix, enveloped this area. All those who did not know about this were very frightened. People heard voices in their heads. They claimed about a certain zone. The territory that was chosen turned out to be Egypt. It was not without reason that the first wonder of the world became the first zone of evolution. The Sphinx, a lover of riddles that he asked travelers, became the guardian of the crystals of evolution. Those who do not answer will be eaten by God. This voice was broadcast into the heads of every person. As it was said, this zone appeared by an unknown force so that people could take away the crystals of evolution while they were isolated from the whole world. Even when she was full of fear, she thought clearly, realizing that they had 3 ways to get out of the zone. Her heart calmed down. Fulfillment of one of the conditions will result in the disappearance of the zone. Otherwise, all people will remain imprisoned forever. There were some discontents. People from other areas found themselves far from their families, and they did not care about the zones. Getting out of here was their first priority. The dead also entered the zone and were already seizing a bus, which obviously had people on it. There was a large-scale attack by the dead on the transport. They were hungry for fresh flesh, which was on the passenger seats. The bus was a treasure chest for the zombies. A pleasant surprise awaited them inside, for which they made their way with all their might. The driver pressed the pedal to the floor, but in the sands, the speed would not be great. If no one helped them, death would be inevitable. Having picked up great speed, they still hit the border. Apparently, their fate will be known. The collision was painful. The driver should have lost his life instantly. He was the only one with a one-way ticket. The evolution zone was truly impregnable. Even a bus at high speed could not pass beyond its boundaries. Passengers prayed for salvation. Zombies gave no rest to the survivors and drove them into a corner. Gloria understood that the situation was heating up. Those people were in mortal danger, and a sense of duty prompted her to save these defenseless people. Perry warned Gloria that they would only be able to save her when she gave it her all. They ran along a sandy path, the driver driving all the passengers into even greater danger when he decided to drive away from the monsters. Everything around was reminiscent of some kind of miracles. Concrete forests against the backdrop of ancient statues and pyramids. The strangest was the Sphinx. His gaze drilled into every inhabitant of the evolution zone. It was not for nothing that he became the keeper of the crystals. His eyes shone like candles in a temple. No one could deny his divine power. It was not for nothing that he became the guardian of the ancient pyramids. Incredibly, the Sphinx was definitely not a simple statue. The zone awakened hidden power in him, and he will again ask riddles to stupid travelers, which will be a test. The driver is his own tomb in the wreckage of the cabin. His fear has left him forever without the sky above his head. The creatures were more terrible than any nightmare. They were all exhausted. They went wherever their feet took them, where instinct would tell them there was not a drop of reason in them. The passengers are in mortal danger. The monster's eyes shone with the flame of rage. They are hungry, which prompted a constant hunt for fresh flesh. Sometimes people can be much more terrible than any monster, since they are ready to throw their neighbor into crowds of monsters to save themselves. She did not show real cowardice on the part of this impudent person, but she stood behind when the girl saved her life, putting hers on the line. On top of everything else, she reproached the brave beauty for the fact that it was she who was to blame for the fact that they got on the bus. There was no combat strategy in that dead thing. It went straight into battle. One could not expect an insidious stab in the back from it. The girls huddled in the back seats. Their fear knew no bounds. Their teeth clenched, tears flowed from their eyes, and screams were heard on the other side of the zone. The heroine was not a simple girl who was afraid of death. The beauty had the courage to stop the zombies with an ordinary pipe, thereby saving the passengers. Still, her strength is not enough to push through the walking corpse, and Rose asks for help from her friends. Together, they were much stronger in any case against the crowd. Everyone will be defeated, even the walking dead. They have a chance to escape from the monsters. The girl turned out to be smarter and braver than everyone else, and used the collective power against the coming death. Even at such a moment, that impudent girl decides to run away first and casts her gaze towards the exit. Such impudence is incomparable to anyone. She leaves all her friends to the mercy of fate when she has taken advantage of them. But suddenly, another monster at the entrance interferes with her plan. Do they have a chance to escape against the two dead people? Or will Perry and Gloria have time to come to the rescue? The impudent woman began to lose hope of survival. They were surrounded on all sides, which means their chances of survival became significantly less. It was clear from her face that she was ready to do anything to survive. She would use any opportunity to her advantage. Still, she manages to escape, leaving all her friends and Rose with two corpses, which will devour them without pity. There was no shame. She ran and didn't even turn around. The death of her friends would be a moment of sadness for her, which she would forget after knocking. With every second the situation was heating up, the first dead man had already snatched the pipe into his hands. The other dead man was nearby. Everything was terrible for the heroines. The monsters made their way onto the bus. It was unlikely that anyone would save them, since they were imprisoned in a steel tomb, the ticket to which was the last journey. That willpower evaporated the very minute the second dead man appeared. The fragile beauty saw no way to get off the bus alive. Her last hopes left her, and everything else followed. Her eyes, empty of hope, suddenly change. A sparkle appears on the pupils. Shards of glass break right in front of her, which means that the saviors arrived on time. Here he is, our hero. The savior is just a student. The fighter against evil came at the very last moment. Now the zombies must change their route. Now they need to escape. A couple of moments and the beauty could lose her beautiful face. A couple more seconds and the girls could not avoid death. A master at rescuing beauties, Perry, as always, shows the effectiveness of his fight against the dead. They do not pose any danger to him. This is what a real hero looked like to her. In a moment she forgot about fear. The monster did not have time to touch her, since her savior turned out to be much faster. She understood that the battle was not over yet, and her savior was still in great danger. Her fears were justified. The zombie instantly appeared behind Perry's back, but he didn't care about the danger behind him. Such opponents weren't even a match for him. Just as he avoids the attack, he literally disappears from the dead man's horizons. The monster will never be able to cope with such speed. He was calm, his movements were smooth, like an ordinary student, but capable of performing miracles that encourage faith in the future. Such a hero can be trusted with fate, since his strength alone can make every enemy kneel before him. And again he decapitated a couple of dead men. They are like a glass of water for him to invigorate him at the beginning of the day. Rosa fully appreciated the strength of our hero. By her standards, it was amazing. He easily dealt with two dead men in a matter of seconds and sent them to rest. Perry looked at Rose as if he had already met her before. Or rather, in the future they would know each other. She looked back at him sweetly. The beauty still could not move away from what she saw. Since everything happened too quickly, her eyes could not even follow the movements. Yet it turned out that way. He recognized her as someone, Apparently, she played an important role in the future, that even Perry managed to remember her. Rose was embarrassed by him. Such strength and charisma clouded her head. Her tongue became slurred, as if standing in front of her was the one whom she had loved all her life. Rose doesn't have time to thank Perry for saving her when Gloria bursts into the conversation and points out that everything is clear outside the bus. The dead man's corpse confirmed the safety inside the transport, and Rose was able to find out the name of her new idol. Gloria instilled confidence in all the passengers and indicated to them that they should follow her. Still, the rescue did not come without bad news. That impudent girl ran away and put herself in danger. Right now, she is not with them, and being alone in the middle of the apocalypse is terribly dangerous. The policewoman was horrified by what she heard. Joy was instantly replaced by fear that the defenseless girl was in mortal danger. Perry was well aware of how badly things were changing. Literally, every rescue was not without losses. The impudent woman was already very far away. She was running and didn't even think about the fact that everyone was saved. And she was running towards death. Suddenly, she was covered with a strange shadow. But there was not a cloud in the sky. The clouds could not block her sky. What was above her was just falling on her. Finally, she noticed this strangeness above her head. Apparently, her fear set her up. Betrayal cost her much more, so to speak. The miser pays twice. Now her salvation was pointless. She would die. Even if she had previously sacrificed her friends, her greed destroyed her. But what kind of giant creature crushed the impudent woman? An incredible danger is approaching the bus. The situation has only gotten worse. She died in front of everyone. The sand giant crushed her and didn't even notice because of her size. Gloria already sensed this horror outside the bus. An unprecedented danger comparable to a catastrophe was approaching. Nevertheless, the Guardian woke up after a long sleep. From his gaze, it was clear that he was heading towards our heroes. The support under his feet shook. Only Perry could know what to do when meeting the sand god Sphinx. The living statue frightens the bones. His gaze presses on the victim like a mythical mountain on the back of the Titan Atlas. Once an ordinary statue, now a terrifying guardian who will kill anyone who does not displease him. This is all our Sphinx. That scream deafened all the passengers. Fear enveloped them, and not without reason. This disaster was a real horror in the real world. Perry recognizes him from thousands of others. A lone guardian who was stronger than all the other guards of the evolution crystals. The girl has lost hope in life so many times that you can lose count. Perry, as calm as ever, continues to calm everyone else down with his unshakable spirit and willpower. At such a moment, he orders everyone to sit down and start reading. He behaved strangely, and Gloria just noticed this. There was no time to explain. If Perry knows what he is doing, then you can trust him. Otherwise, the claw that pierced the roof of the bus will pierce you. No one made any unnecessary movements. Everyone was quietly reading books, without any fear for their lives. But in this case, everyone would be scared. The silhouette of a giant god was looking down at them all, through a hole in the ceiling. His eyes shone with the rage of the gods. It was he who could bring down the heavens on all mortals. But something in his behavior was strange. The sand god did not kill his victims instantly. He looked at what they were doing. Apparently, it was not for nothing that Perry ordered them to read. There was some kind of catch in this. Onlookers from the rooftops were already sure of the death of our travelers, but if Perry controls the situation, then success is guaranteed. Even a history textbook was able to attract Perry's attention, or rather, he considered it very interesting. It's not for nothing that he studies at the history department. Incredibly, our student once again surpassed himself. The Sphinx noticed that everyone was reading and decided not to distract them from the important matter. Perry has a real ace up his sleeve. His knowledge can do incredible things. He knew much more and used it to the fullest. All the onlookers were speechless. Everyone was sure of their death. But now they did not doubt the knowledge of our hero, since it was he who prevented the attack of the Sphinx. Why did the statue leave them alone? How did they manage to do this? What kind of trick did the guy use that reflected the rage of the great god? These were the questions that circled in the heads of those people. When the Sphinx left, Perry closed the book with full confidence. Everything was exactly with his intentions. Everyone was still afraid. But Perry, as always, knows how to calm, after all. Even the most absurd solutions to problems saved their lives, like some kind of grotesque. They can breathe a sigh of relief. Gloria was watching the Sphinx. Their lives were on the verge of a cliff, but the student of the future again saves everyone with his mind. Initially, the policewoman could not believe such nonsense, but now she was jubilant. Her eyes shone with admiration. Perry was incredible to her. He was absolutely calm. Everything went as it should. but Gloria could not believe what was happening before her eyes and how our hero managed to know everything in advance. However, everything could not have been simpler. They had to remember the very advice that was broadcast in people's heads, and it said that they needed to understand the character of God. Gloria had already completely forgotten about him. Rosa remembered the whole advice word for word, but no one could even think that this was the answer. The Sphinx was precisely that sand god, and it was necessary to remember the associations about him. Not a single traveler could pass by the Sphinx and not listen to his riddle. It was always the same, and the answer was no different either. But those who answered incorrectly were killed by the sand god. He was distinguished by great cruelty towards fools who could not answer the riddle correctly, but he treated smart and wise people with respect. One day a sage appeared who was still able to give the correct answer, as a result of which the Sphinx threw himself off a cliff, which means that he treats smart people with respect and fears them. Reading books was just an excellent demonstration of wisdom and a good mindset, which Perry took advantage of. But suddenly something disturbed his peace. Some thought awakened a strange surprise in him. But it turned out that they all initially had a chance to survive without our student, since they already had books. Suddenly it dawned on him twice at once. It was not for nothing that he recognized Rosa. It was she who could become the savior of the zone. Since only she remembered the advice, she had different books, and only she could help all the inhabitants of the zone. The beauty reminded him of someone he could remember from the future. She was probably very influential. Rosa was very shy about our hero, but still decided to thank him and get to know him better. He didn't make her feel even more insecure, and even find similarities between them. Incredibly, in the future, our Rose was one of the most influential people in China, mastered several elements, and could create storms and cataclysms. He thought sensibly and understood well that she received those powers due to the evolution crystal, since it was one of the most powerful. They even managed to find a common language, and it's not easy. He's a student at the same institution. Gloria interrupted their sweet heart-to-heart conversation by saying that they should deal with some sheep, and they should also deal with the Sphinx himself. Still, it's not so colorful. This method only worked until they attacked the Sphinx in order to obtain the crystal. The girls began to notice the darkness on the street and decided that they would rather spend the night on the bus, but Perry thought completely differently. There were too many factors that conflicted with the girls' decision. Since a large amount of blood could create many dead people, there was not enough food, and they also became a target for those onlookers. Perry had known for a long time about those who were watching them. He counted about 5 people who were constantly monitoring them. Such information put a lot of pressure on Gloria. She was already afraid that they could not only follow them, but also be planning something. The student understood that those people were not just spying, since the conditions of the zone and release from it contradicted this. Those onlookers had to come up with something in order to get the crystal or fulfill the other conditions. One of the conditions was that they should kill a few people to free themselves, which means that our heroines should not get into trouble if they are not ready to kill. Rosa and Gloria finally began to understand the seriousness of the situation. The zone is not grotesque, and every mistake can cost a lot. It's already completely dark. Perry points out to them that they should follow him and get it into their heads that in the current situation, people can be more dangerous than zombies. The main character completely forgot about the 2 girls. They had completely lost hope that the heroes would take them. The student realized that he had forgotten about the others while he was talking with Gloria and Rosa. Everyone followed the path that Perry had trodden for them, killing the monsters one by one. He hoped that the sandy wind would dull the zombies' senses and they would be safe. Gloria didn't know where they were going, but Perry knew where to go in advance. And his knowledge of the city is amazing, since he found the most optimal place to survive this night. The policeman didn't just end up on her duty. She also knows the city well and suggested a supermarket as a place of survival. But not everything is so simple. Perry also knew about this option. It was good. But the supermarket is the epicenter of the dead. Yes, there is a lot of things you need there, but a small store around the corner will be much safer. The store's resources are quite enough for 5 people, and dying in a giant supermarket from greedy people or hungry monsters is not the best solution. The store was very convenient in the event that they could be attacked, since one understanding was that an attack from the main passage would be useless, since there was an opposite back exit. In order for our heroes to fall into a trap, both entrances must be occupied, which means that the enemy forces will be weaker than if they block one exit with all their forces. Rosa greatly admired her idol, since he was both smart and strong, but Gloria knew that she did not fully understand his strength. And then she began to praise him. How he chopped up dozens and hundreds of dead people. This greatly displeased Perry, since he was trying to protect them, and all they did was praise him. Suddenly, he stopped on a sandy road. Apparently, they had already arrived at a place where they could spend the night. It was very quiet on the street, which was strange, since there should be at least echoes of enemies here, but nearby there was only deathly silence. Gloria noticed this store. It was right in front of them, but she didn't notice that it was too quiet here, which is why Perry stopped. In this quarter, there were only old people, who should be the easiest to get infected, but there were no zombies anywhere. The student suspected something. For now, he decided to explore the situation alone, since there was an obvious trap that only Perry could defuse. So he stopped, sensed something, and was preparing to attack. The wind was blowing the sand, and the silence around gave a certain uneasiness. Perry understood that danger was right under his nose, and it was precisely this danger that should scare away all the monsters in the area. This entity was nearby. The student had already smelled it. He was on the trail of a mortal enemy. This enemy was truly strong and could compete with our hero. The entity was frightening with its appearance, sat in a trap, and waited for the victim to fall into the trap. Now Perry knew who was in front of him, and most importantly, where he was. Such a victim would turn out to be the most dangerous enemy for this entity. Something about this car was not quite right. Everything about it inspired fear, as if she was hiding an incredible danger behind herself. Perry already understood what this car was hiding and indicated to the one who was located under it to get out as quickly as possible. The student found himself a good enemy. If not for him, all the travelers would have fallen into the clutches of that creature. Gloria imagined the strength of that creature that easily lifted the car. Fear enveloped her, and she was no longer so confident in Perry's strength. Rose saw real horror in front of her, which no one should have seen. So this creature came to light. In comparison with others, it was much more terrible. Stronger, however, it was superior to all the dead and everything. Gloria saw this danger and asked Perry to quickly run away from this monster. It was not for nothing that Perry, after the time jump, said that all long-range weapons were outdated, since not a single bullet could penetrate such enemies with such strength. The creature attacks. It threw the car with such ease, as if a child were playing racing. But Perry is not so simple. His agility is enough to dodge every attack. The student of the future warned his friends to be on the alert, as this rumble could attract new zombies. Where did such a creature suddenly come from? Can they really mutate and become stronger? If so, then the threat has become much more dangerous. Perry called the monster mutated, but not completely. They arrived at the moment of its mutation, while it is still weak. They have a chance to kill this creature. But after all, he was distinguished by his special strength and speed. Strength and size. Literally, he was the strongest of his kind. It could destroy cars with its power. The monster can only be defeated if you find its weak points, otherwise it will be a corpse. The girls were very worried about Perry's life, since it was no longer possible to find a loophole, as in the case of the Sphinx. All their fears were a waste of time, as Perry avoids the attacks, like a hare running away from another forest predator. Perry is not so simple as not to dodge such a light attack from such a monster. Such a monster, our hero, was equal to a mosquito. Still, the monster was furious. Hunger forced him to hunt for the weaker, but right now he was unlucky with his enemy. This creature will not give you peace, but our hero had no intention of dying. Such monsters should already be commonplace in the future. What scares us more is who these creatures will mutate into next and how quickly. The monster fails to catch Perry, and it falls into a fiery rage, which made it fight even more bloodthirsty. Perry even manages to mock the monster and its hopelessness, since if it were to attack, the student would easily get away from all the pressure of the enemy. Gloria has already imagined what will happen to Perry if he gets hit by this monster that destroys cars with one attack. But Perry never lets you down, and he doesn't attack, as if he's waiting for an opportune moment, since this creature has very few weak points. The monster is already at the limit of emotions. Anger is already bulging out. It quickly wants to absorb this impudent person who does not even attack in response. The lieutenant noticed that there were no longer any escape opportunities around Perry, which meant that he needed to attack, or his death was inevitable. Perry did not expect such pressure from the monster. Now it was much faster than before, which means the strength also increased. With its entire appearance, the creature frightened everyone in the area. Among the zombies, no one was equal to him, which pushed him to the top. Now Perry did not run away from the monster, although he was already nearby and could break off a tasty morsel. Still, everything would not be so simple for the monster, since the enemy in front of him was much more dangerous than all the previous ones. Here he is, a furious look that cuts enemies into pieces. The student no longer intends to dodge, now he will cut from the shoulder. As expected from our hero, one swing of the blade, like a halberd, cuts off the hand of a monster. Perry's behavior in battle was strange. Why didn't he cut off the monster's hand earlier? What was on his mind? Gloria wondered. The fight continued, and the student decided to look at his sword, although there was a furious monster behind him who became even more angry since his hand was cut off. The fears were confirmed. The monster screamed in pain. Now it cannot fight with all its strength, but with hefty bloodthirstiness. The furious monster was already rushing at full speed towards Perry, preparing to blow his head off. Incredibly, the monster was already on his heels, but our hero prepared a pose for a powerful attack. Apparently, death had already come for the dead man. This pose meant a sudden counterattack. As expected, he left no chance for this monster to mutate further. Now, he is another zombie who fell at the hands of the hero of the future. He didn't even manage to understand what happened. The hero disappeared from sight and cut him. Brains flew out. Perry again proved stronger than every monster and exceeded all expectations. The strongest monster on the block, the one who scared all the weak zombies and people away from here, fell in front of the tiny man with his smeared head down. The larger the cabinet, the louder it falls. The girls were amazed. He killed them with one swing of a dull sword and left no hope for life. Incredibly, after death, the monster began to release energy that poured into Perry, but he had not noticed this before. His strength was replenished. He became even stronger, as if he had increased his level. This is the ability of the crystal. He is capable of this. At this rate, he will easily increase his rank even after a year, yet his strength is amazing. The friends were very worried about that fight, but it turned out that Perry could chop up every enemy in a matter of seconds, which seemed strange since the hero of the future always just avoided attacks. Everything was obvious. The whole secret was hidden in the monster's body. They only had to take a closer look at the monster. Not everyone liked to look at this creature, also dead, with brains blurred all over the earth. Gloria thought that Rosa was not afraid, since she did not show it, but the horror was present in her. Yet she was determined to examine a potential enemy in the future, since one must know the enemy by sight. Perry saw potential in his girls, as both were uncomfortable with the sight of blood and flesh, but were able to overcome their fears, meaning that they would become very important people in this world. He grabbed Rosa's hand. She immediately blushed with shame, but Perry wanted to calm her down so that she could see the whole monster properly. Rose began to study the monster's body, and Perry called Sergeant Gloria to join. He asked them about what they saw. There were bones on the body. They served as his armor, and it was impossible to pierce it with an ordinary sword. The bullets would not even scratch the creature. The exoskeleton was too strong to cut the creature in half, which is precisely why Perry did not attack it for a long time. What was more frightening was that such mutations appeared in just one day. What would happen next could only be guessed at the worst. The bones not only covered the entire body, but also became stronger. This advantage makes this creature immortal in the area, since not a single bullet will pierce such a frame. She compared these bones in terms of strength to metal. In front of them was a tank on 2 legs, which could only be penetrated by other military equipment. This is exactly what was stopping Perry. Thoughtless attacks will lead to the destruction of the blade, and shots are only a waste of ammunition. As the hero of the future found out, it is best to hit the joints, ignoring the exoskeleton. This is how it happened to kill the monster, cutting off its head with just one swing of the blade. Gloria immediately decided to inform everyone at headquarters about this, but didn't think at all that she had to get out of here first. Due to the fact that this big guy was the strongest in the area, the path to here was clear. But now weak zombies will fill the entire space here, and they should quickly get out of here. As expected, they arrived at the store just in time, just as the zombies were just gathering in the alleys. There were candles in the store, and our heroes decided to use them. There were 50 candles in total, and one was enough for only an hour, which means that they must be used wisely. Food is also a valuable resource that should be spent wisely. Gloria agreed with this, and also planned that canned and sugary foods should be used later, since they have the longest shelf life. Incredibly, Perry was very lucky with his partners, as they promised him that they would take over the cooking and let him go on vacation. The future hero tried to offer to help, but even Rose agreed with the lieutenant. Perry's pressure immediately dropped. He finally agreed to help and can relax thanks to the care of such beauties. These are craftswomen. They both did their best and prepared a royal dinner, but Perry was very lucky to have them. I won't tire of repeating. The hero praised this dinner without tasting it, as it initially looked very appetizing. The first test of a masterpiece from the fragile and delicate hands of beauties should be promising. The reaction was amazing. He recognized this taste from 1,000. As if lightning struck, so to speak, the hands of these sorceresses conjured an object of art. Rose already thought that Perry didn't like it, but he was more surprised, since it was magical. It was all due to the spices, which were the best in China, but the merits of the girls cannot be denied. These spices would become a luxury in the future and the most valuable product on the black market, something he hadn't eaten in 10 years. This taste was a memory that he could only obtain by jumping back in time 10 years. Gloria took care of Perry and tried to get him to eat meat, since he paid all his attention to vegetables. He refused such care, since he loved vegetables very much, and besides, he wanted to leave meat for them too. But he really wanted to eat vegetables, which were in short supply after the apocalypse, which was precisely the reason for his love for growing produce. The sergeant thought that he cared about them and brought out his kindness in him so that they would have a good meal. She was struck by such thoughts. She admired his kindness and began to sob like a child. Rose more and more did not understand the reason for the strange behavior of the children, since one was crying for no reason and the other was reacting to food as if he did not like it. The candle has almost gone out, which means we need to get ready for bed and wait for a new day. The plates were empty and everyone had finished their dinner just as one candle went out. Even here, his concern knew no bounds. He decided to share the blankets with everyone, but did not take a single one for himself. He decided to sleep separately from everyone in the corner and let them bask together. But Gloria stopped him for some unknown reason. She asked him to stay with them because they had a lot of questions that they needed answers to. The lieutenant wanted to know why Perry was so strong and where he got so much knowledge, which was also interesting to Rose. The hero scratched his head and was finally able to understand what they wanted from him. The crescent moon had already taken its place in the sky and illuminated the path for everyone. The girls were shocked by what they heard. They were surprised by the evolution that the zombies had, which became stronger due to it. For only one reason, everyone around them became stronger and adapted to the world around them due to evolution. Rodents acquired strong front teeth to crack nuts. Zombies became stronger to stab people. In general, with each stage of evolution, zombies can be divided into as many as 5 classes. Stray zombies were the weakest, did not differ in particular strength and speed. Strength and size also did not change. The mutated dead were already much stronger and faster. They became giants among their own and could pose a danger to an ordinary person. The frightening corpses were a nightmare in the flesh. It was not for nothing that they received such a name. Only the 4th stage, and they are already disasters that can bring many problems to humanity. And here come the catastrophes, the highest level of power among the dead. They cannot even fall close to the power of the descendants, the highest level of evolution. The wandering ones did not have much strength, and they did not have any obvious changes for a long time. But suddenly they acquired fangs and claws instead of teeth and hands. Literally over time they became the most terrible creatures. Among the evolved, there are rare species, and that giant was precisely the species that is found only in the sands of deserts. The girls understood that the dead are becoming stronger, and what about ordinary survivors who cannot evolve? But there is also good news, and evolution zones allow people to become stronger. By that time, the sun had already taken its place at the zenith and gave an incredible view of its dawn. Finally, they began to get out. It's worth reconnaissance of the situation so that there are no unnecessary problems in the future. Gloria did not walk calmly. That conversation could not get out of her head, as the situation was getting worse and worse every minute. Rose was also restless, keeping her weapon at the ready to stop every surprise attack. And they were haunted by the very good news that people were also becoming stronger. Every person could and can evolve, even including our girls. They have already noticed that it is difficult for ordinary people to survive here for at least a day. Just for this reason, tomorrow they're going to get the Crystal of Evolution, and then the girls will practice fighting against the dead. Such good news never made the heroines happy. They were more scared for their lives. Other girls did not want to learn new skills and become stronger because they were very afraid of the danger outside. He forgot about them again, although initially he didn't even want to take them with him. Morning was coming on the heels. Sunlight was supposed to scare away the dead, but the strongest and bravest remained. So they came across a dead man on the way who could become training for the girls. But no matter how it was, Perry decided to take him on himself, since he was stronger than ordinary strays. It didn't take long for our hero to deal with such a weakling and plunge a sword into his head. The blood of a fallen monster dripped from the sword, which could not do anything to our hero, since the difference in strength was too great. Still, that zombie did not live up to Perry's expectations, since he was weak, but the girls in their heads praised him again. Suddenly, something appeared to the side. The hero glanced and waited for a new attack. On that side, there were dead men who were weaker than the last one, which would be just right for training. Finally, they will be able to practice. Perry considered these dead men to be weaklings, which will be just right for our beauties. Gloria was already in full readiness, but Rose did not at all like killing someone, or she was afraid of these creatures. He thought that his excessive concern had a bad influence, but his fears disappeared when he realized that she was only a high school student and it was normal for her to be afraid. Suddenly, she woke up. Perry promised her that in any case, he would be there and help in an emergency. Rose gathered her courage, and now the fire was visible in her eyes. It shone brighter than any flame. Yet Perry knows how to raise the morale of even such a beauty. She was very reasonable. Realizing that the elder could become the leader of the entire apocalypse, she could not get lost in his shadow. The dead did not wait for them to stop having a nice conversation. For them, there is no matter of honor and pride. Killing and only killing is on their minds. The sergeant took on the first and gave him a good rebuff. It was not in vain that she was recruited into the service. She did not waste time on it. Her actions were lightning fast. The dead man did not have time to respond with anything before his hands were wringing and preparing him for death. Zombies attack mindlessly. Precisely because of this, their actions are easy to predict and take action against them. If, of course, they are fighting against an intelligent creature. The monster can only utter his screams, which no one will ever understand. Gloria can breathe a sigh of relief. Defeating the monster using close combat was not easy for her. Now it was Rose's turn. The monster was already rushing after her. She was looking straight at him. Fear was present, but her intentions were higher than that. Here comes the first zombie attack. She easily avoids it, realizing that it is too early to counterattack. Time after time, the monster misses Rose. His thoughtless attacks are of no use. Her gaze shone brighter than all the stars, beautiful in everything. Two opposites in one beauty, unearthly sweetness and incredible fortitude. The flame of rage in her eyes and the fear of murder in her heart. The best time for a counterattack, she pierces the monster with her spear, like Odin with the spear Gungnir. Now her hands are stained with blood up to the elbows. The harsh world did not give her a peaceful life, marking her with the mark of a killer. But fate gifted her with the skill of survival. Now she is a real hunter. This time she is a killer, a victim and a witness, a monster killer, a victim of conscience and a witness of death. But she was able to cleanse the world of a monster that could kill many more people. Rose experienced the greatest fear in her life and overcame it. The strength of spirit of such a beauty is amazing. It will be difficult for her to recover from this. She will simply need support, since it is quite difficult to accept the first murder. Here she is, a worthy support. Perry, as promised, came to the aid of his fan at a difficult moment for her. The world was no longer the same for her. Everything was collapsing around her. The first murder of even a dead man would be difficult for her to accept. But suddenly, her gray world is painted with the brightest colors, and all she had to do was stroke Perry's head, since her beloved can warm her up warmer than any sun. He made it clear to her that there was no longer a moral standard in this world, and it was impossible to regret the death of a dead man at all, to which she immediately agreed. An incredible dawn shone over the sand dunes. The second day of the apocalypse began. The zone has not yet been deactivated. Perry noticed that it was dawn and he could move on to meet his goal. Gloria suggested climbing higher for reconnaissance purposes and looking at the situation from a different angle. Perry agreed with her and pointed to the building, which was the best option for reconnaissance. It was not for nothing that he chose this particular high-rise building. It was abandoned, which means that there will be few zombies who were previously residents here. Gloria wondered why they chose an unfinished building. Perry revealed the obvious. Where there used to be crowds, there are a lot of zombies. Where there are no people at all, you can meet at most a lonely couple. It was precisely this kind of thinking that Gloria could not get used to. The student pointed out something very important in that direction. Gloria immediately had to look at it. She couldn't understand at all what Perry was talking about. She looked at the pyramids, at the Sphinx, but nothing was visible. Still, she managed to notice a familiar car that was burning. Had it really been set on fire under the scorching sun? It turns out that this was the same bus that Rosa was on. Something was clearly wrong about it. Everything turned out as Perry said. They were already hunting for them, but they were not found and the bus was set on fire, an act of hot-tempered people. Gloria was glad that she had listened to him, but they did not know who these hunters were. But Perry was sure that they would find out very soon. Suddenly, he again pointed to that place. Something was happening not far from the bus. A group of radicals was passing through there. Their goal was an evolution crystal, which they were going to get without thinking about the consequences. The crystal shone brighter than the sun in the sky and attracted the attention of magpies, who climbed higher and watched our heroes, and also set the bus on fire. People did not find a place to survive and lay under rubbish, plastic bottles, and food packaging. Even Rose's friends noticed the glow, but it was very hard not to notice. This light provided many questions for Gloria, But its greatest impact was on Perry's crystal, which began to glow strangely. He noticed this influence. The crystal resonated, and that light only made the condition worse. The radicals were real madmen. They rode iron horses into the hands of danger without even thinking through a plan of action. It is unknown how they planned to defeat the Great Sphinx, the mythical god. But their intentions were definitely serious. The bandits were confident in their luck, and because the statue did not move, they thought that even God was on their side. So far, its wheels have been moving confidently, but if the Sphinx wakes up, this bandit will be in trouble first. He promises himself that with the help of the crystal, he can take over the whole world, becoming an absolute ruler. Gloria was senselessly afraid that such a dangerous thing as the crystal of evolution would fall into the hands of these people. Still, Perry was right about the fact that people are sometimes more dangerous than zombies, since such people are ready to enslave the whole world and create hell in the world in the flesh. The lieutenant wanted to quickly move forward and solve problems with these bandits, but Perry wanted to watch them even more. The hero said an important quote that in a game in which life is at stake, one absolutely cannot believe in luck. Suddenly, a sandy hill appeared under his wheels, on which he would take off like on a ramp, but this would be his last jump. A strange silhouette was formed from the sand, into whose paws the bandit was flying at full speed. Where are his loud and promising words that came out of his mouth much more confidently? To stumble on his first steps and die the death of another fool, that is his fate. The bandit was squeezed between the giant hands of the Sphinx as divine punishment fell on this fool, whom the sand god did not like very much. The radicals are now not so confident in their victory. Soon their heads will fly from their shoulders at the hands of God. This will be very low on their part, since he will die as a punishment for the killer of fools. They did not understand what was happening before their eyes. There were two sphinxes here, and no one could have expected this. The first statue also stood motionless. Something was wrong with him. There was no that look that pierced the hearts of everyone. Incredibly, the statue was crumbling before our eyes. What was happening? It was a fake. These were the questions circling in everyone's heads. They began to understand the situation they were in. The bandits were hunting for a crystal and fell into a trap. The Sphinx was an insidious enemy. It is not for nothing that he is the god of mysteries. He smiled evilly in response to these impudent people. There was no point in running. They simply would not have had enough speed to escape from such a giant. All that was left was to fire at him. The shots also did not do any good. Each time the situation became worse and worse, and the Sphinx turned from a god in appearance into an insidious god. Gloria was surprised that these people had weapons, since this gave them an advantage in long-range combat. Except they have a lot of weapons and explosives, which they use against the sand god. The explosion occurred, but it was not for nothing that Perry suggested observing the actions of the bandits and coming up with a plan at the expense of their sacrifice. Incredibly, they were able to wound this giant, which means that he is not immortal, and somehow he could be attacked. The pain made him howl at the top of his voice. They brought at least some harm to God and benefit to Perry. But suddenly a sand whirlwind appeared nearby. What is this? The Sphinx's new ability. Something is wrong in the Sphinx's behavior. Why would he erect a new statue? His trick has already been revealed to everyone and no one will be surprised by it anymore. They understood that explosives were working, which meant they had to use them to their fullest, and then they would definitely defeat God himself. A couple more sticks of dynamite and our insidious god will fall and scatter him with the wind. A second explosion sounded. A little more and there will be anarchy in the world, where the throne will be occupied by a bandit and a tyrant who will shed rivers of blood, but will take the place of the ruler of this world. A successful future has already flashed before them, where the apocalypse will come after the recent one. Now he didn't scream so much in pain. The Sphinx shook himself off and was ready to take out his divine rage on his enemies. Things got much worse. He recovered with a couple of shakes of his head. What was his secret? The old wounds have healed. The explosives no longer work. Something is wrong with that statue. There was some strangeness in it that was able to restore the Sphinx. The bandits were no longer so joyful. It seemed to them that the sand god was immortal, and they would no longer see victory. They had already harnessed their iron horses and were preparing to escape, but it was unlikely that the insidious god would let them go after such an intervention. The Sphinx will not tolerate this. They certainly will not be able to escape from God's punishment. The speed will not be enough. As expected from God himself, he will not let them escape even if they solve his riddles. The onlookers felt the horror that came from the monster. They understood that such a large size and immortality they could not overcome. Gloria herself was not confident in the success of our hero. Even she thought that there would be no way out after this. The enemy was too strong, but she never received an answer. Perry had already slipped away and left the horizon in an attempt to steal the crystal directly from the clutches of God. The student conquered the sand dunes and quickly rode towards the pyramid. Now he has observed enough and can come up with a good plan against God. The speed was amazing. He was in front of everyone, attracted the attention of all onlookers of the clouds of sand. One day the Sphinx himself would notice him. There were no unnecessary words from his mouth. His ride was more confident, since now he knows everyone is waiting for every sneaky trick from the god of riddles. Fear, this is not about him at all, is unbridled rage and strength that gives him fearlessness in front of any enemy. Onlookers did not immediately recognize Perry. They even considered his behavior reckless, since this happened a minute ago. Just those bandits gave him a good opportunity. He received enough information and can avoid every surprise. The pyramid here is also not simple. Even if there is a crystal of evolution at the top, there is some kind of secret at its base. She definitely haunted Perry. Something was wrong with her, and he clearly saw it. The student suspected the pyramid that it could become the second guardian. It is not for nothing that in other zones, the guardians protect the crystal in pairs. The hand tightly squeezed the steering wheel, stronger and stronger. His intentions were more serious than ever. Victory would be guaranteed. So the Sphinx himself noticed him. He could not expect such pressure from his enemies. Everyone wanted to get a crystal and become many times stronger. The hero stood opposite the Sphinx. The guardian understood his intentions. He was definitely not here to observe the views of the pyramids. Perry exceeded his very impudence. He dared to call God a cat and called him closer to him. A small fire burned in his eyes. With immortality, no one can interfere with him, but this does not bother our hero. The Sphinx followed Perry's lead. He was able to win his attention and become a worthy enemy and a madman who decided to attack the immortal god of mysteries. The bandits were sure that our hero's behavior was insane. They considered him an idiot for going into battle with such danger without coming up with a plan. Sergeant Gloria understood that if Perry decided to do something, then he was acting correctly. He would never run where his feet took him. Meanwhile, the sandcat was preparing a strong attack. Its silhouette was terrible. There was nothing good about it. But Perry is not so simple. It is not for nothing that he is the hero of the future. It is on his shoulders that the salvation of all humanity lies, and it is he who will get this crystal. Incredibly, he used the blade as a spring to launch himself into the air to avoid the blow. And he does it in the best possible way. His skill is amazing. He uses every consumable to the maximum. Owning a motorcycle is like they are one and the same, as if from birth he is on wheels, demonstrating his incredible skill to everyone around him. The Sphinx is disgraced time after time. No matter how fast he is, Perry will always escape all sudden blows. The onlookers did not believe their eyes. They thought that everything would be so simple, and the hero would bow his knees at the beginning of the battle. No matter how it was, he would destroy their expectations until they died. Really, the Sphinx's eyes shone with a golden light, a new ability of the god that no one had ever seen. He probably recognized our hero as a worthy opponent. The sand was collected into silhouettes. The sand god collected new statues, which consisted of golden sand, and the Sphinx himself was a jeweler. Incredibly, these statues turned out to be clones of the great god. The danger was increasing with every second. Furious warriors under the wing of God were chasing at full speed towards our hero in order to bite into his neck and bite him to the bone. Perry noticed new enemies, just a few, and they would catch up with him, which he understood very well. Rose saw how the situation changed. The number of abilities was amazing, and also the call of clones that surpassed anyone in speed. The onlookers themselves were also surprised and glad that our hero was able to expose his new ability, but they were most confident in his death. They were sure that the clones would catch up with him. He wouldn't be able to run away from them for long, and he would die for the sake of the bandits' success. But something changed. Perry realized that those creatures were much faster than him, and he decided to stop to protect himself from them. It was not they who attacked him, but he was waiting for an opportune moment to take their lives and chop each one down. The bandits thought that our hero was desperate and realized that it was useless to run. Rosa and Gloria did not understand the reason for the stop, but they completely forgot that he would never do anything without thinking. The chase continued. The sand lions were on their tail and did not give their victims a chance to escape. Perry quickly changes the course of events. He makes a sudden U-turn to meet the clones and prepares to once again destroy the expectations of the radicals. There was never any fear in his eyes. He rode forward towards death. Everything in his behavior was unshakable. The two opponents came face to face, each moment thrilling, like a gladiator in the Roman Colosseum fighting for victory. Over and over again, Perry did the impossible. Literally everyone saw that his life was inevitable, but he did not care what they said about him. There was not a drop of fear or constraint in him, only a thirst for murder. Now the bandits were not so sure of his death. They were even surprised by his skill. None of them was capable of such a thing, and would hardly dare to do such a thing. The girls also couldn't believe their eyes. Everything happened too quickly. In an instant, he chopped down every lion and again demonstrated the impossible. But suddenly something was wrong. The top of the pyramid shone like the sun in the sky. Incredibly, that pyramid definitely hid something in itself, since the Sphinx received a great boost due to the pyramid. Perry seemed to be struck by lightning, and he himself suspected that something was wrong. It was not for nothing that there was only one guardian here, or rather, there could be two of them. The closer Perry was to this light, the more influence it had on his crystal, as if someone was looking at him, burning through his soul. Yes, there was still something wrong here. Perry wanted to solve the riddle of the Sphinx, what he was hiding in this ill-fated pyramid. After its strengthening, the Sphinx became much faster and stronger than before. The pyramid was a stronger guardian than the Sphinx, and remained in constant secrecy in order to protect the crystal to the last. Now Perry was being chased by a giant cat. She was faster, and could easily catch up with the hero of the future. The girls noticed this oddity with the pyramid. It was not for nothing that the Sphinx became as fast as its maneuverable clones. Suddenly, there was dynamite under Perry's wheels. Could he really use it against the Sphinx, yet he should no longer act against him? Perhaps he had a more insidious idea in his head, and he needed the stick of dynamite for a more important purpose. The onlookers understood that a genius was playing against him, and it was better for them to observe his decisions, since he always destroyed their expectations. The fuse has already sparkled. A little more and there will be a strong explosion that everyone in the zone will hear. The sand god smiled evilly, as he was sure that he was another fool who would waste explosives on him. But something didn't go according to the Sphinx's plan. The checker flew in a completely different direction, yet Perry has a more interesting plan. The Sphinx's insidious gaze changed to fear. He was scared, as if someone had figured out his secret. Perry's reconnaissance went better than just successfully. A strong explosion thundered throughout the entire zone. Perry learned everything he wanted and can begin to think about further actions. The student of the future discovered a way to escape from this sandy hell. Everything he saw and learned, all that remained was to easily take the crystal of evolution and emerge victorious. The girls did not expect such a move at all. Perry knew the northern region too well and used his knowledge to the fullest. The bandits didn't expect this either, or rather, they were at a loss. In such situations, no one would remember that there might be a subway under their feet. But Perry was much smarter than everyone here. In every situation, he was one step ahead of his enemy. The situation with the bus, the store, and the building. If he had not been here, a lot of people would have died. Here, he can already say goodbye to the monster and leave his desert, since he has revealed too many of his trump cards to him. So the trail disappeared for our hero. Everything was according to his incredible plan. First to observe the madmen, and later to go and reliably study the behavior of the monster himself. Rose and Gloria can breathe a sigh of relief that their beloved Perry is safe, but Gloria was haunted by the fact that he did not give them any meeting place. Beauty confirmed her words and believed that it was better for them to wait for him here. But Lieutenant Gloria did not like this decision. The policewoman takes big steps forward in her progress, now thinking like Perry as she believes they need to think through their next steps. Someone was tracking them from the bandit high-rise. Gloria managed to notice this, which means they were tracked down and the hunt for them will soon begin. The main thing is that it was these people who could set the bus on fire, which means that the hunt has been going on for them since yesterday, and they should find a secluded place. The radicals probably noticed Perry's skill and will want to use it for their own purposes. If he disobeys, the girls will be taken hostage, which will be very convenient for them. It was worth leaving before it was too late, since they could become a burden for him. The screams of the radicals were heard everywhere. Their plan was clear to everyone. Even the girls guessed their intentions. One of the observers was already running to report to the chief about the discovery of those who were on the bus yesterday. The commander of these 6 liked to flip a coin, which may mean that he was gambling in their activities. The radical commander was covered in scars, had clearly suffered many battles, and had become a madman professional warrior. The 6th observer reported everything he had. Apparently, they really liked Perry. It's not for nothing that they are chasing him like that. As expected from the radicals, to use what was still in effect, they understood that the hero knew a lot, and his knowledge could be used to obtain the evolution crystal. They had already set out to hunt, gathered all their strength to capture the 2 girls. The commander was definitely a madman. It was late afternoon. The second day of the apocalypse was coming to an end, but the danger did not disappear. The girls ran at full speed to avoid falling into the hands of insidious bandits who had never spoken to a woman in their lives. The sergeant decided to leave here through the alley since they might be noticed, but Rose thought that there were a lot of zombies there, which would be a reason not to go there. Gloria understood well Perry's lesson that people in recent days are much more dangerous than the infected. There it was, that very same alley. There was nothing inviting to go through it, but there was no other way. A dark room, just enough to hide in and no one will ever find them. That darkness still haunted Rose. She was sure that there should be a lot of dead people here. But everything around was empty. Gloria was worried about something completely different. The sounds of an engine from the side, which meant only one thing: the bandits were very close. As expected, those radicals were looking for our girls with great interest, but they could not find how long it would last. They drove very close until they knew that their goal was very close. The lieutenant listened carefully to their every word. Her fears were confirmed. She now also thinks one step ahead of her enemies. The radical commander was sure that the target was very close, since they had no transport. The girls understood that they should hurry, but were at a loss as to where to go. The policewoman knew the area well. She was given such a position for a reason. She constantly looked around so that suddenly the enemies would not attack their trail. And besides, the wind covered their tracks as they moved along loose sand, along which it would never be possible to track a person. Gloria told Rosa to be quieter and lower than the grass. They walked slowly, not a single unnecessary movement, gracefully, like ballerinas. What was disturbing was that not a single zombie appeared on their way. Whether it was luck is not at all clear. The atmosphere was very tense. Every wrong move could lead to their death or make them a burden to Perry. Everything is terrible. It is unknown why there was suddenly a creaking sound from the door. There was definitely something behind it. But this is not so important, since the radicals could hear it. Still, they kept their ears sharp and definitely heard this creak from the side. Gloria was confused. It was unlikely that anything would help them, since predators were already on their trail. Rose claimed that it was not her. This creak came out of nowhere. But was it so important? Now they are in a trap. They managed to pass the time, but the radicals still found a trace on the tail of these beauties. What awaits them now? One can only hope for a hero with an iron horse. No one knows what horror awaits them. The escape plan did not work. Perry was very far away, and the radicals could use them as hostages to take advantage of his power and knowledge. Last time, Perry did the impossible, tease God himself and escape alive from his clutches. Only our hero could do this. He was thinking about how to defeat this giant monster, the god of riddles and simply the Sphinx. His head was full of thoughts. But it seemed strange to him that the sand god had so suddenly received incredible power. Something was definitely not pure here. According to the memory of our hero of the future, this level of complexity is not at all typical for evolution zones. Immortal guardians also receive power from nowhere. What was even more disturbing was that in her past life, Rose was able to overpower these guardians and take the crystals of evolution for herself. But suddenly it dawned on him. It wasn't about the high school student at all. It was connected to something completely different. Here is the solution. Perry himself was to blame for everything. That strange reaction, that terrifying look, all the red threads led to one thing, to our hero. The power of his crystal was that he could absorb the power of the dead he killed, but in return he became like them. Suddenly it dawned on him that he was able to unravel the most important secret of the Sphinx and its guardians. He had already come close to solving the mystery of why there was only one guardian in this zone. Everything was initially not as the eyes of all the inhabitants of the zone saw. There were truly two guardians, and it was the second, stronger one who was hiding inside the pyramid, summoning zombies and giving strength to the Sphinx. Perry decided to find the entrance to this subway to get out. Then, together with the girls, discuss a plan to defeat the guardians. Incredibly, even in the destroyed metro there was still electricity, which means it will be possible to go far away from here or something better to come up with. Perry was so immersed in his thoughts that he even forgot to look around and did not notice the giant crowds of the dead. Well, now he has enough information about the enemy, and he can say that he knows the enemy by sight like the back of his hand. Here we are taken to a coin flipper, the boss of the local area who is hunting for our heroines. Today should be a holiday for the bandits. If they manage to catch Rosa and Gloria, then it won't be difficult for them to use Perry for their dirty purposes. The radicals were truly insane. Only the symptom of a psychopath was visible on their faces. They went crazy due to the fact that the boss imposed unheard of wealth and power on them. Even if they get it, a second apocalypse will come to the world. But suddenly something interfered with their zeal. A couple of bullets erased the smile from their faces. All the evil that they did here had no meaning for them, since they were now dead. The lieutenant holds her position for a reason. She can easily stand up for herself and the defenseless, realizing that they need them alive. She can take advantage of their helplessness. A couple of criminals have already fallen. It's unlikely that this will scare the bandits to come closer, but it certainly won't last long. The girls were in a trap that they had driven themselves into. All that was left was to fight off the enemies with their last strength and wait for Perry to arrive. Still, Boss doesn't care at all about who Gloria is, even though she is the commander-in-chief of the army. Now there is no law before him, and his representatives for him are only men and beauties in uniform. Here are the first shots from the bandits. They clearly intend to do it seriously. They are even ready to wound the girl. Not a single bullet hit, as if they were not aimed at, but they had to run, otherwise they would not escape death. The heroines decided to hide around the corner between the houses. While they have strength, their legs are walking, and their heads are thinking, they can always be saved. But the most important bad weather was the cartridges. They ran out at the very moment for them. They were at a dead end. The bandits were nearby. The cartridges had run out. Everything could not have been worse. The situation was heating up. Perry would have to wait for a long time. For the bandits, everything was perfect. The main enemy, Perry, was distracted by the Sphinx. The girls ran out of ammunition, and he could easily grab them, torturing them to death. Their temper was terrible. They laughed at the fact that the crowd could squeeze two fragile beauties into a corner, real weaklings. The girls understood that the situation was very bad. Gloria thought about the next steps, but apparently nothing came to mind. But suddenly, panic spread among the group of bandits. What was it? They were talking about a certain sound of an engine, which was similar to a motorcycle rushing behind them. Suddenly, the six seemed to be struck by lightning. It turned out that the sound was coming from above, and it was getting closer and closer. Incredibly, the student of the future arrived just in time. Oh, our savior, how magnificently he flies over the heads of the girls. So he crushed the smartest one, salvation is now guaranteed, and the girls have nothing to fear anymore. Screams came from another alley. This greatly intrigued the boss of the gang of bandits. Someone unknown was driving the bandits out of the alley. He was clearly strong, as he was able to clear the street from a crowd of enemies. They were very frightened. Little by little, their immense confidence left the radicals. Their enemy was able to show them their place. Here he is. Perry will not spare anyone now. Every enemy will fall at his hands, since they dared to attack his beauties. As it turned out, they still recognized him. The strange thing is that they called our hero of eccentrics, even if he was a local genius. The girls warned him to be careful, as they want to use his power and knowledge against the Guardians. Perry will not engage in long negotiations. He will first ask a question. After receiving an answer, he will already decide what to do with the enemy and what he deserves. The boss told the whole truth that he wanted from him. All that the head of the district needed was our hero and his capabilities. The student is good at daring his elders, only he has enough power to take the lives of the entire gang. The boss will not tolerate such impudence. He comes with a business proposal, and the kid is rude to him. That's all his thoughts. It was precisely because of such people that the disaster only worsened and grew into an apocalypse, Perry believes. The bandit boss does not believe that good people are destined to survive in this world. If they stumble, they will die. Only scoundrels survive here. Perry made a simple but true point. Hard times create terrible people, bringing out their worst traits and hidden intentions. The existence of such people can pose a threat to the entire civilization, namely those people who want only wealth for themselves and destruction around them, who do not care what happens to a loved one, those who have no values. The bandits were perplexed that Perry suddenly glowed with red flames, and even considered him infected. By that time, the student rushed to attack. His enhancements brought our hero to a new level of strength. He literally became lightning and disappeared in front of his enemies. The radicals should already be accustomed to the fact that an eccentric can do the impossible, but they were ready for this, or rather, for such speed. Only a moment passed, and almost the entire gang was already dead. They were pierced by an unknown force. The hope of victory left them. It was a real horror for the bandits. Their whole life flew by before their eyes, but they were supposed to become worthy opponents for our hero. The boss was already in despair. He ordered everyone to shoot every centimeter in this alley. Bullets are no problem for Perry. He is much faster than them. His sword cuts off more heads than bullets come out of their barrels. Everyone called him a madman, an eccentric, and a suicide bomber. But now each of them is dying at his hands. His hands are chopping off their chests and heads, and they can't do anything. A couple of moments and each bandit says goodbye to his thieving, criminal life. All their joys have become a moment of happiness. After all, the gang boss saw the reality before his eyes. At this rate, Perry would only chop up everyone, and their kidnapping operation would be a complete failure. Rose saw that the elder became stronger again and again. Literally, with every second, his strength doubled. Suddenly, her look changed. She was scared. Something was in front of her and made her shake in a cold sweat. Still, the insidious boss will always be cunning. He has no moral standards, and moreover, there is only one way left for him to survive: to capture the girls, threatening them with death. Rose and Gloria could have relied on Perry, but he was too far away. They could only rely on themselves and their strength. Everything was not so colorful. The last way out of such a situation would not be successful for the bandit boss, or rather, he would die even earlier. All his pressure disappeared as soon as he took his bullet in the back. Now he won't be able to do anything, his whole gang is dead, and he will be next. This criminal was unlucky to get against our hero. If someone else were in his place, he would have had some chance of winning, but here he is not destined to win. Still, one partner survived, but something was clearly wrong with him, as if he was pretending to have a weapon. He looked truly ridiculous. It was probably from him that Perry snatched the gun in order to stop the arrogant boss. So the last minute came for him. His head exploded, and he didn't even understand anything. Surprising is already commonplace for Perry. In addition to the fact that he is a master of close combat, he is also quite good with long-range weapons, which his enemies could not expect. The hero thought that it was his imagination, but still the boss was still alive. He was lucky, and the bullet did not hit any vital organs, since Perry is a skilled shooter. The insidious boss was very arrogant. Even now he hoped for his luck, so that his coin would decide whether he should live or die. The elder knows how to inspire hope in his enemies. He said that he was interested, but can this be considered true? Of course not. But the bandit was already completely sure of his words, but he didn't know what Perry was at all. Nothing prevented him from asking for a coin. As expected from our Perry, there is no mercy. He wants to hope for luck. Let him hope for it in the next life. The main joy for Perry is that his beauties are safe and sound, a real luxury in these times. In this battle, they had large supplies of equipment. All that remained was to collect all their weapons and go to the store for negotiations. Incredibly, the inside of the building was filled with monsters. What will happen when they all get used to daylight and get out? Gloria was finally able to understand what caused that creak that ruined their entire escape. Yet Rosa was not to blame for this. Now they can return. They had a lot of equipment. Victory over the Guardians was guaranteed. Gloria clearly remembered the remaining bandits who needed to be finished off so that no one else would dare to disturb the peaceful people and survivors. But all the circumstances have long been against the bandits. Those zombies from the subway have already become accustomed to daylight and have probably already encountered their group. The remaining radicals waited for the last search group, but they did not return. Instead, they would have a campaign of walking corpses. Not long ago, there were no zombies here, but fate is clearly not on the side of the scoundrels who have to survive the most. Screams, and attempts spread throughout the entire northern region, and today another problem in the form of bandits has been solved. The second day of the apocalypse was coming to an end. The day did not pass without success. Now you can return to your home store with peace of mind. Our heroes returned with bags full of weapons. The day was not in vain. They cut off the life of the threat to humanity and obtained a lot of equipment from them. Those cowards were very happy about their arrival. It seems they really missed them, because when they saw the heroes, they simply beamed. For the hero, this day was not a difficulty, the little things in life. But the cowards were worried about the weapons behind their backs. There were, well, too many of them. The girls were on the verge of death. He fought with God, but for him everything was nothing, as if nothing had happened. Such fearlessness infuriated the heroines. This day had not been easy by any means, but now he could drink soda and enjoy his vacation to its fullest. Gloria recognized this weapon. It was from prisons and police stations. They could do anything to her colleagues, which she sadly understood. Still, it was not in vain. We managed to get rid of the bandits, who were a great threat to civilians, but the zombies had not been canceled, and they still posed a danger. There were definitely advantages to the death of the radicals. If they had acted differently, they would have suffered much more losses and problems. Gloria definitely agreed with Perry's thoughts, but it was just one word from his mouth that bothered him. When they first met, Perry called himself a cleaner, which could mean that he had been getting rid of problems for a very long time. But at the time, he did not understand that he was in the past. Suddenly, Rose became interested in what our hero found out during the battle with the Sphinx. This is where it should be very interesting. What Perry will tell in a couple of moments should confuse the girls, since they could not expect this from an ordinary keeper. As you know, their main enemy was the Guardian Sphinx. He depicted him in the form of a soda can, for the sake of completeness. The high school student well understood how strong the Sphinx was. In addition to its size, strength, and speed, it was also immortal. It was just a nightmare. Perry suggested focusing not only on the Sphinx itself, there was another statue on the side of the pyramid that also needed to be destroyed. The same trick of the Sphinx, which the first crazy bandits fell for, hoped for luck and died. Getting an evolution crystal is like a die or kill contest. To achieve such luxury, you have to sacrifice everything, kill a god, or die at his hands. Suddenly, he hinted at the fake body of the Sphinx, pointing to a green soda can. What could he mean, I think, girls? They understood that something was wrong here. The fake Sphinx definitely had some secret, which Perry knew about. The first time the bandits managed to wound the Sphinx with an explosion, they inflicted quite a lot of damage on him, which was initially a success. This was not to the liking of the sand god. Ordinary people were able to hurt him. For him, this was the worst humiliation. But in an instant, everything became useless. As the student hinted, what affected that damage? Why did he suddenly become immortal? The beauty finally guessed that the statue contained the main secret of the Sphinx's immortality. As long as it was intact, it was impossible to wound the god. The problem was too big. With the information that God was not immortal, it became easier. But the issue with the second statue had to be resolved. It took longer for Gloria to reach her, but she was close, since the second Sphinx played the role of a totem that bestowed immortality. Both Sphinxes are containers. The motionless statue contains the life of a god, which is why it stands in the rear under the protection of an attacking guardian who cannot be wounded. Once you destroy the rear Sphinx, life will flow into the attacker, and that's when he can be attacked. The policewoman was at a loss. She could not understand how this was possible, even if it was not very important. The main thing here was to defeat the guardian. Rose assimilated all the information in the best possible way. She realized that it was worth destroying the second statue, and only then would it be possible to defeat the Sphinx. But that's not all. There's not much time after destroying the statue, so you should hurry up in order to finish off the monster before it's restored. The plan for Lieutenant Gloria was difficult. Her brain was boiling in her blood, but it did not give any result. Suddenly, an idea comes into her head to blow up the statue along with the pyramid, but Perry is unlikely to like it. As expected, with this explosion, they will bring themselves even more problems and even an extra enemy that the girls did not know about. The heroines did not understand why this idea was so bad, that this could happen from the explosion of the pyramid. But now the curtain has been opened for them. Inside the pyramid is hiding a creature much more terrible than the Sphinx. Not that it was frightening, but that it was much stronger and more dangerous, which could not mean anything good. It was difficult for them to imagine something like this. Something stronger than the Sphinx was hiding in the pyramid and not showing itself. The cowards were also speechless. They were unable to eavesdrop quietly, but they clearly succeeded in getting new nightmares for the night. The loyalty of that guardian was amazing, but in many ways it would have been much worse if he had gotten out and struck fear into the people who needed the crystal. That guardian was strong, but he didn't care about anyone until someone took the crystal. And when the stone of evolution was taken, the zone would fall and the guardians would disappear. Everything was as expected. The girls were in complete shock. Such information plunged them into misunderstanding and fear, since they cannot overcome one guardian, and then the second is even stronger. Perry knew that there were 3 evolution crystals, which meant there was enough for all the girls and for him that everyone received their own power. The little cowards dared to go out to the heroes and wish them good luck, but hardly anyone remembered them. Gloria and Rosa were definitely in shock when they saw these two, since before there wasn't even any wind coming from them. But here they wished them luck. Perry clearly explained that no one is going to die, they just need to come up with a competent plan that can overcome the Sphinx's cunning. The police suspected in the hero's words that he was going to take the crystal alone, but he was behaving too arrogantly, so they were a team. So Gloria begins to be indignant. What does the arrogant student think? Going alone to battle with God, no matter how wrong it is? The lieutenant will not allow this to happen. Rose was in solidarity with her sister. It was not just that she learned to fight monsters, she is the same comrade who will cover your back. On top of that, Perry is very strong, so the girls have a reason to trust him, and extra hands never hurt. Now he has no right to refuse. Decisions are made by the whole team, and not by the commander. He has nothing more to say in denial. It is decided, they agree to Perry's request for help, and from that day on, preparations for the implementation of the plan begin. The phrase flew through the entire store that they would get out of this zone together, and it couldn't be any other way. Before thinking about a plan, you need to refresh yourself so that your brain is strengthened. It is not for nothing that it is the same muscle mass. It needs to be developed. There is plenty of time to prepare. 3 days will be spent on training, drawing up a plan, and finding resources with equipment, even if they already have plenty of it. The energy that was absorbed into Perry after killing the zombies could become a powerful amplifier, and our hero tested it on those bandits. It was not for nothing that he was confused with the infected. Previously, the bloody crystal could only increase Perry's physical strength, but after rebirth, killing zombies concentrated energy, which was collected in the crystal and subsequently gave significant enhancements to our hero. The red crystal played the role of a battery in Perry's body. The gain was amazing from time to time. He literally became lightning for his enemies. That gang suffered a tremendous defeat. The new power made the hero's movements lightning fast. No one could follow them. Only mirages flashed before their eyes, and Perry himself had already plunged a blade into his back. The bandits were very weak and little energy was spent on them. But the Sphinx, he is a completely different case. Defeating him will require a gigantic amount of energy. Then triumph will not take long. There are 3 whole days to prepare. This time is enough to accumulate enough energy to defeat the Sphinx with one swing of the sword. Rose had no desire to sit in the store and waste her skirt. There was an exact decision. They fight together until the end. Lieutenant Gloria didn't have to wait long, which means the hunt for zombies and their energy has begun. The plan will soon be in action. Strangely enough, the little cowards decided to stay in the store and eat vegetable salads, so as not to let the good things go to waste. Her attempts to stop at least the girls were in vain. They left and did not even listen to her. Whether they remember that she is still with them is unknown. The 3rd day after the apocalypse and the 1st day of preparation, Perry gains the energy of the dead and charges his battery to full, so that it is certainly enough for one god. The 4th day after the apocalypse, on the 2nd day of preparing the plan, Perry and Rose were able to find the drone on the control panel. The plan was almost ready. The 5th day after the apocalypse, already at the end of the 3rd day of preparation theory, the girls are studying the plan in detail and painting every detail. Things are moving anxiously but surely. Another day went with a bang. Preparations were in full swing. We can say with certainty that starting tomorrow the zone will fall, and the heroes will receive new powers. The cowards were in their 7th sleep and drooling into the pillow. Everything was going as it should. Everyone was doing what they could. The student of the future is also getting ready for bed after difficult days of preparation. By the morning, he needs to get enough sleep and be ready for a serious battle. Gloria glared at her partner. Perhaps something was bothering her, but she was silent and could not say a word. She seemed to be thinking about something. She couldn't take her eyes off Perry, as if she was frozen in thought. Perry is not a fool and feels this strange eye on himself. Yet he decided to ask what was wrong with him that he was being stared at like that. Her guesses were confirmed. She stared into space only because she was thinking about how his powers were too great and how he got them. Such thoughts were clearly not to the liking of the student of the future. It is not for nothing that he hides the fact that he knows everything 10 years in advance. He remained silent about this. He understood that they might have thoughts about the fact that his knowledge and strength are far ahead of everyone else. But Gloria did not think about this with some hidden self-interest. Her interest knew no bounds, and his strength only made her trust him. But suddenly, she remembered the promise that Perry himself had given them. He seemed to have even forgotten about it. The promise was that they would always fight together. In an alliance, they would have knee-deep seas, waist-deep mountains. That was the promise, and it could not be forgotten. Such sincerity struck our hero. He did not expect this from the girls, since he saw in them only a partner and a future important person who is capable of controlling the elements. Of course, he will not be against such a wonderful offer when he can fight hand in hand with such beauties, who will soon not be inferior in strength to weather conditions. The 6th day came after the apocalypse. The sun was shining with all its strength, which means that luck will be on the side of the heroes. The remaining survivors, before there was no word from them, now after the destruction of the gang of bandits, they were not threatened by anything other than zombies. Smiles were shining on their faces. Finally, their lives were not oppressed by insidious bikers, and there were much fewer dead people. One of the survivors suddenly heard the sound of a motor. Someone was rushing across the desert on a motorcycle and apparently was heading towards the Sphinx. Incredibly, the plan is already in motion. Perry is already rushing towards the crystal, while the survivors are gathering supplies and consider him crazy. What kind of madman is rolling out at such an early hour? How impudent he is. How he dared to provoke God. What madness. These are the thoughts that visit the heads of these survivors. But suddenly their leader noticed something. He probably recognized our hero and all his actions that he committed 3 days ago. It was clear in his gaze that he saw the Savior. Now it is clear that he recognized him and will root for his victory with all his heart. He ordered his men to climb higher. It was necessary to consider every moment in this exciting battle, even if there was a giant cat wandering around there. Meanwhile, Perry has already entered the territory of the Sand God. Once in his domain, one must behave according to the rules of the Sphinx or overthrow him from the throne. The giant cat noticed its new enemy. Now someone will come out victorious and take someone's life. The Sphinx does not hesitate and prepares its clones for attack in advance, but whether its attacks will be as useful as before, now all its mysteries have been solved. The most dangerous warrior is not the one who chops stone, not the one who constantly trains his skills, but the one who, with the shine in his eyes, is ready to convince the enemy that he is already dead. The one whose blade shines with the intention to kill. Our hero possesses these qualities. This is his strength, whether it's a stick in his hands. In any case, these cats will be chopped into pieces. In the curtain of smoke, the silhouette of the killer of the gods is visible. Our hero dared to challenge the Sphinx and is ready to overthrow him from the throne. It won't be that simple. A stick of dynamite is flying straight at the Sphinx. What will be his next actions? But as you know, more than one explosion will not be of any use. Yet this is a way to convince him that his secret has not been solved. The survivors did not understand what was on this hero's mind. The thought of defeating this monster did not even enter their heads. Such explosions are not a hindrance to the immortal god, but how long will it last? Very soon the plan will come into effect, and the god will lose his current authority. This is a real salvo of dynamite sticks. It's unlikely to hurt him in any way, but it's the best way of distraction. So 4 powerful explosions were heard, and there should have been a white veil of smoke before our eyes for a short time. The survivor did not know Perry's real plan, thinking that he was wasting too many explosives. But once he discovered the hidden agenda, he would have strong confidence in the hero. Still, he realized that our hero's goal was not the attacking Sphinx. He needed a statue that would be crushed to smithereens any minute. Perry managed to hit the survivors. The battle became more and more exciting. Literally, the ground under his feet became red-hot lava. Our god has emerged from the clouds of smoke. Everything is already decided for him, and execution awaits him nearby. You can be sure that if his eyes see what the hero of the future is going to do, he will be in a burning rage. His anger will have no frames and boundaries. Everything around him will become ruins. The first explosion was heard. Now the Sphinx should understand that the secret has been revealed, and he will no longer be able to deceive the survivors. As it turned out, he was very afraid of smart people. Earlier fools came to him on motorcycles and they died quickly. But now in front of him is a sage who unraveled his secret. Anxiety, God is furious, the real battle has begun. God's punishment will be unbearable. Now Perry will be the first target. Something inexplicable was happening under the wheels, like an earthquake that would lower our hero to the core of the earth. Incredibly, the Sphinx is definitely angry and earnest. A gigantic column of sand rises up under his feet. The motorcycle can no longer be restored, and Perry will have to fight on his feet. The survivor uses every emotion to describe every action in battle, literally being on the battlefield himself. The blade is almost out of its sheath. It is a consequence of the fact that the Sphinx will soon get what she deserves and leave the crystal of evolution as a dowry. Soon, his sandy body will crumble into particles, and he will become the next victim of Perry's sword, which will pierce him deeper than ever. The hero is already preparing for a large-scale attack. The blows should already cause damage to the Sphinx, which means that everything will not be useless. From minute to minute, only horns and legs will remain of the Sphinx. As a guardian, he has already fulfilled his duty. All that remains is for him to give the crystal of evolution to the strongest and wittiest. The first swing of the blade, the sword is filled with the desire for death and sharpened by old victims who fell from the edge. The Sphinx should be prepared for the worst consequences for itself, since the first time the blade entered very deeply, which means the second will be promising. As it turned out, the cut will not be weak, but it is too early to rejoice. Such success means nothing while the monster is alive. Only when there is final victory, only then can one rejoice. The guardian became even angrier. Baring his teeth, he glared, pressed with his presence, and sowed fear. The solution was correct. There is no shell. Now God is not so immortal, which means you can do with him whatever your heart desires. The sand god realized that his secret was now revealed. He could not come to terms with it, and there were 2 ways left for him: victory over this insolent person or a valiant death. Perry again wants to surprise with something. He is hiding something behind his collar, which means that our hero still has a lot of trump cards. He again proves that not only can he swing a sword, long-range combat has not been cancelled. It's unlikely that a couple of bullets will cause anything serious, but it's just the thing to distract him. The most important thing is that the bullets do not hit the eyes. Otherwise, you will have to fight for a long time without a shell, and without vision, it is even worse. The student walked confidently. No one could afford to behave so arrogantly towards God. Everyone lived in fear under his cover, and he became the only militia. There were still 20 seconds left before recovery. Time is really short, so it must be used wisely, otherwise defeat. The Sphinx did not like this attitude towards himself. He is a god after all, and here he is humiliated and cut off from the shoulder. But Perry is not one of those who will feel sorry for giant cats. He intends to be serious, die or kill. That's his principle. Still, it did not help the Sphinx to protect his eyes. Now he is a blind god. His vision is closed to him, and he will have to find the enemy by touch. There was less and less time. Every second counted. It was impossible to waste time. Perry did everything quickly in order to hurt more. The Sphinx attacked at random. His eyes did not see, and he had to act on instincts, and Perry's tactics were amazing. A blind monster would be much safer. Each swing of the sword brought a lot of pain and torment, but the hero did not even have the thought of feeling sorry for the giant cat. As soon as the Sphinx felt pain, at that very second he tried to brush away the impudent mosquito that was thirsting for his blood. Even if he still wouldn't stop doing so, there were 10 seconds left before recovery. They definitely wouldn't have time to kill this creature, but they still had the opportunity to injure him more. The student is preparing another attack. He is going to plunge the blade straight into his back and pierce him through so that he no longer stands in the way. As expected, Perry outdoes himself. All his opponents leave the battle with defeat. No one has a chance for the desired victory, since it always slips into the hands of our hero. You can't expect sympathy from him. You've become his enemy. Expect death and only death. You won't even notice how she comes in without knocking on the door. The Sphinx was in unbearable pain. Such horror had never happened in his life. 3 days of silence made him feel confident, but only during this time a way to defeat him was found. Then Perry was struck. The Guardian was so strong that even he could not pierce him. The power of the gods is amazing, and their strength is also terrifying. He pulled out a sword from the Sphinx, which created a kind of fountain of blood on top of everything else. It was as strong as stone, but he managed to pierce even to the flesh. There was only time left for one blow. 5 seconds would pass instantly. You couldn't hesitate. You had to act so as not to be late. Just 3 seconds and the fight could end in favor of the Sandcat, which can't mean anything good. One blow, the last second. The whole mountain of responsibility lies on the shoulders of our hero. His main priority is to be in time. Here comes the Radiance. The Guardian from the pyramid has created a new cover for the Sphinx. I can't believe at all that Perry managed to do it. But this doesn't mean anything at all. He always has a trump card up his sleeve. Nevertheless, the fears were confirmed. The moment came when it was best for the hero to run further, so that this creature would not catch up. It got even worse. Perry understood that just a couple of seconds were not enough to finish everything quickly. Suddenly, I was transported to a destroyed subway. It still had electricity and the lights were on. And the dead were there too. Even if the hero freed them, several monsters remained to guard the train. The lieutenant forgot something in the subway. What is she doing there? Such an important point. What is the point of killing those zombies? Even here, the roar of battle could be heard. She realized that the noise was from the pyramid, and it dawned on her that she needed to hurry. She probably found what she was looking for, and also managed to put down heaps of the dead, the best partners gathered in one place. Incredibly, Gloria was able to find the train. But why do they need it? Where and why do they need to go? But this is definitely part of the plan. Suddenly, that same survivor noticed that the statue had been restored, which meant that our hero had to run at full speed so as not to fall under the attacks of the immortal creature, since now she would not let anyone near the shell. The Guardian inside the pyramid gives the Sphinx incredible powers. Without him, the Sand God would be an ordinary kitten. Perry had a couple more trump cards up his sleeve, but he just had to use them somehow. Or rather, that same train would fit well here. In the very near future, Perry will need to think about the next step, but will it be so effective? There was still time to assess the situation. It was clear that the Guardian from the pyramid was in place, which means he would still have time to properly hinder them. This means that he must use his accumulated energy, otherwise he will only die if he does not use up his battery. The Sphinx was completely restored and found his shield, which gave him immortality. The abilities of the Guardian from the pyramid are truly amazing. The Sand God was furious. Having gained immortality and a shell, he will finally be able to teach our hero a lesson. Even a circle of white chalk on the floor will not help him. They stood face to face. Both looked into each other's eyes. In this battle, there were unequal masses, but corresponding forces, a hero burning with the desire to win, and a god guarding the crystal, which his opponent was chasing. The survivor was amazed by Perry's fearlessness. A gigantic, immortal, and omnipotent god stood in front of him, and he didn't even think about running. But everything must be according to the plan, in which our heroines are not without reason. Soon they will play their role. This takes time. So it has come, the time for the beautiful warriors to come out. Perry calls Rose to fulfill her part of the plan. The time for the second part of the plan has come. The immortal god is distracted by Perry himself and thinks that his shell is safe. But he did not know at all about his opponent's partners. They made a fool out of the god of riddles. And here are our beautiful hands steering the drone. Soon the Sphinx will get more than a child. It will be unusual for God to see how his statue is broken by a modern drone. Perry, with his plan, again made a fool out of the Sphinx, as in one myth about the sage. God was attacked from the rear. He will be completely humiliated if he sees what happened to his second shell, which will become dust any minute. So another explosion thundered, the shell was destroyed, and Perry played the ideal role of bait. All that remained was to fulfill the games of the Killer of Gods. A notification was heard that the statue had been blown up. From this moment, the battle with the mad god of riddles could begin. The Sphinx was simply furious. Our hero understood this well and even mocked him. Since he was initially destined to die a fool, he would be thrown off the throne and would be another fool. Even if the Sphinx understood that his secret had been figured out, Perry clearly explained that everyone knew about all the secrets of the Sand God. With such power, Perry can dethrone gods, cut metal with a single swing of his sword, and outspeed lightning. Now the survivor can breathe a sigh of relief. Victory was already in the hands of the eccentric. Just wait a little, and they will be freed from this prison. Perry expressed all the thoughts of his enemy. He mocked the one who should already have lost hope of victory. It was not for nothing that the Sphinx was afraid of the sages. They easily circled him around his finger. The Sphinx, god and master of riddles, could easily outwit fools and madmen who had strong charisma and zeal to move forward, but lacked gray matter in their heads, which he took advantage of. Even now he did not fall. His eyes are deep and empty like lunar craters. He literally crumbled before our eyes, but he continued to stand on his fours, continuing to keep the crystal. The survivor experienced a roller coaster. At first he is perplexed. A second he fears with all his heart for the hero. Later he rejoices and again clutches his head in fear. It is impossible to deny the wisdom and wit of the Sphinx. He is smart, but he just can't guess what awaits him soon. Just for this, Perry gives him a hint. Suddenly, God was frightened by a strange roar from the side. Something was definitely brewing, and he understood it well. Incredibly, the student's priority was not to win the battle. The main task was to bring the Sphinx to the right place and to a pre-planned place. Over and over again, our Sphinx was being twisted around his finger. He was truly angry and understood that another sage was standing in front of him. Perry began the countdown, at the end of which the Sphinx clearly faced the worst, his greatest nightmare and fear. This roar was familiar to the noise of the rails. Is it really that same train flying straight towards the Sphinx? Only he cannot expect where it will fly from. This is precisely Perry's trump card. This is the end of the countdown. Now there should be a turning point in their battle, in which our hero became the winner. He was incredible. He provoked God. He was distracted, and he put the Sphinx under a train. The best teamwork that guaranteed success from the beginning. The Sphinx did not have much time left. He knew that he had lost. But he fulfilled his noble role as a guardian, becoming Perry's biggest problem. An ancient statue against the centuries-old heritage of mankind, a battle between two different times and opposites, technology and traditional cunning and strategy, the fittest won. Everyone carried out their share of the plan. Everyone played an important role in the victory. A gigantic burden of responsibility lay on their shoulders, which they justified. The power of civilization was amazing. Modern technology once again put old traditions and myths into the crypt. Victory was on Perry's side. Rose was jubilant. The preparation was not in vain. They still won and were able to open the evolution zone in less than a week. But the situation did not get better. The dead began to emerge from that subway in huge numbers. There would be a new large-scale wave of zombies that would devour every survivor. They climbed onto the Sphinx and headed towards the pyramid, which meant new danger. The fears were confirmed. The guardian inside the pyramid was angry. Black clouds covered the sky, and black lightning similar to the energy of a zombie struck the ground. The dead were already leaving their lair. Perry was just waiting for them and was ready to chop everyone up in order to replenish the red crystal with energy. The girls harnessed their steel horse and were going to go for the Stone of Evolution. Gloria also had a good handle on the steering wheel. Again and again she convinces of her skill, a truly good police officer and servant of the people. Rose also decided to go with her to storm the pyramid. They are filled with confidence. Now there are no barriers at all. They were at the foot. An incredibly strong radiance shone throughout. This is where the Crystal of Evolution should be, for which they are hunting. Meanwhile, the hero of the future was stacking the corpses of the dead like books on a shelf. They were too weak to form a good battle. He noticed clouds overhead. The Guardian was angry. Probably now the main enemy would come out. Those strange eyes never appeared. His guess came true. This zone was unique and very dangerous, having two Guardians at once. It was not for nothing that the Sphinx protected the pyramid. It was also in the ancient myths that a giant statue preserved the great building of Egypt, and here he protected the second Guardian, receiving his protection. The first Guardian was the Sphinx, who fought on the front lines and was immortal as long as his real body was intact. The second Guardian hid in a cave and gave the Sphinx the opportunity to immortalize. He was much stronger than his partner, but was useless because he did not go outside. Due to the fact that the zombie's energy made Perry similar to them, the Guardian considered him to be one of them and tried to control him. Now he is busy controlling other monsters and is not going to interfere with our hero, which means he can easily take the crystal without thinking about anything. But the dead will not allow you to calmly move towards your goal, constantly bothering their future victims. The infected appeared only to disturb people. There is nothing good in their existence, only hunger and bloodthirstiness. The dead were on Perry's heels. Even the God Killer has problems with the weak infected. You can never think through everything in advance, even when he was able to hide from the Guardian's gaze. Yet the zombies will not give him peace, and there will still be difficulties. One dead person will never become a big problem for the killer of gods himself. Once you cut off the hand of this scum, all problems are solved. The number of dead people was amazing. They climbed up with such ease that their speed was amazing. But no matter how fast they were, they could never become a hindrance or obstacle for him, since he did not send such people towards death. There was very little left. The influence of the Guardian was not felt, and he was completely too loyal to the fact that his crystal was almost stolen. The dead did not hesitate either, as if they themselves wanted to achieve the Stone of Evolution, having received new abilities. Opposite the giant slabs, there was a mysterious passage. He couldn't be here. Something was definitely wrong here, Perry thought. He finally began to guess what this gloomy entrance to the pyramid was doing here. It beckoned with its mystery, which he just wanted to unravel. So he is the strongest Guardian. He looks like a monster from horror books. It is unlikely that he will just let our hero near the Stone of Evolution. The same look followed Perry in the first battle with the Sphinx. The Keeper managed to notice it, and now he will not let him out of his clutches. The situation definitely got worse. Our hero's red crystal was being suppressed. It felt like he was being strangled or pierced through the heart with small needles. The body began to get heavier. The pain was unbearable. It was not for nothing that this Guardian was much stronger than the Sphinx. He was easily able to suppress Perry and influence his mind. But the hero's determination was too great. Not a single Guardian could suppress such rage in his soul. He would squeeze his enemy in his fist and squeeze him to death. Our hero is here for a reason. His mission is to save the inhabitants of the zone and capture the evolution crystals so that many more people survive than in his previous life. The Revenant rooted for Perry with all his soul. All his emotions were sympathy for the hero, and he truly felt these crazy emotions. All the dead people passed by. Their behavior was very strange. Their eyes shone with a light similar to the glow of a crystal. They were definitely under control. They walked into that very passage, completely ignoring the naked hero. The Guardian had the power of control over the dead, which was an incredible ability. Incredibly, the Guardian absorbed each monster to escape from the pyramid, dark energy gushing out in different directions like a fountain. This greatly frightened Perry. He himself could become the next victim of the Guardian. Now they are unlikely to deal with him so easily. What horror! His mind became clouded under the influence of the Guardian of the pyramid. The cave beckoned him, as if it contained the largest reserves of jewelry and treasures. His legs did not obey him. He himself was like one of those zombies who obeys the orders of this Guardian. He definitely needed help. Otherwise, he would become another food for the monster from the pyramid. But who would come to his aid now? In his head, he could still fight against the influence. But his legs had long ago stopped listening to the call of his brain, and walked towards the mysterious entrance to the pyramid. Another dead man decided to visit the cave. The next guest will be our hero, unless, of course, no one helps him. Now his eyes were burning. Like those monsters, he was under complete control. Danger came again at the most inconvenient moment. The commander of the survivors was perplexed that their savior suddenly turned completely in the wrong direction. What happened to him and who attacked him? These questions came to his mind. Crowds of dead people have already made their way into the pyramid, and very soon they will become food for the Guardian. Perry also needs to dispel control over himself. Otherwise, they have nothing to expect except defeat. His head was pounding. His behavior was similar to the character of zombies. They ignored everything and everyone, and our hero didn't care about his surroundings either. The next batch was swallowed up by a terrible monster. Energy flowed in a stream. The more the creature inside the pyramid absorbed, the worse it would be. Perry was drawn there. He could not do anything about the strange desire in his head. That frightening look guided him like a guide dog. Here they are, the saviors. A familiar female voice was heard from the side. They pulled the monster out of the influence. It dawned on him. His mind became clearer. Our beauties are the most loyal among all citizens. Even here, they were not afraid of the crowds of the dead and came to Perry's aid. Here is his true joy, two saviors who promise to fight back to back and always stick together. The most sincere helping hand, Perry is very lucky with his comrades, who don't even care about a storm if they need to save their friend. A couple more steps, and they will be able to get their incredible abilities. Rose, like in Perry's past life, must control the elements and create cataclysms with her power. Some stands rejoiced. Fans rejoiced at the victory of the heroes. Their saviors justified all the hopes that were placed on them. They are saved. All that remains is to help the rescue team and evacuate the zone. A team of real heroes. Before them is the treasure of humanity, which they deserve with all their strength and ingenuity. The geniuses of the present time. They went through a long and thorny path. More than once they were on the verge of death. They left every situation as if unscathed. Bandits, monsters, and gods did not take them. Now no one is able to defeat them at all. The crystal shone like a chest of gold. The light was incredibly bright, but it did not bother the eyes, as if it did not exist. Such was the power of the crystal of evolution, a power that could only be obtained by 3 people who went through a war with gods and monsters for its sake. The minute for which they walked through thorns, through crowds of corpses, which even the circle of white chalk on the floor did not help to escape from our heroes. In a second, the zone will fall. The hero of the future will immortalize his name in the history of the whole world, becoming the strongest warrior of evolution. Triumph in the hands of a hero, the heritage of humanity, a consequence of his wit and strength. No one can ever compare with him, since he is always hundreds of steps ahead of humanity. He was covered in golden flames and filled with incredible power. She was rebellious. Now he is one step closer to saving civilization. This force permeated him. Such a surge of power could not be obtained anywhere. And here was the reaction. His eyes opened wide. The stage of obtaining the ability was magnificent, like knighting, when the king touches the shoulders with a blade, placing responsibility on the warrior's hump. He was in great shock from such a ceremony. Nothing gave such gigantic power that he received here. Incredible. The ability to copy the powers of enemies is amazing. He is able to steal the powers of guardians. In order for people to achieve such power, they will need a lot of luck and ingenuity, and he just needs to get into the zone of evolution. Besides, he knows the time and place of the appearance of each of them in advance. Most people from his past could not even think of gaining abilities and evolving, but Perry can do everything and even more. But everywhere there are also disadvantages, since a zone can have more than just one guardian. In addition, many abilities had limitations that he cannot know about. While he is alive, he will receive all the abilities of the Guardians, and by the end of his journey, he will become the strongest, becoming the most memorable person in this world. So the absorption began. The ability was poured into his body. I wonder what our hero will get. Due to the 2 Guardians, the choice was from 2 cells, each with several abilities, but you can only choose one. Surely the choice will not be easy, since there is a stronger monster from the pyramid, but almost nothing is known about its abilities, and the Sphinx has weaker powers. The choice is presented to our hero, 2 Guardians, one under a veil of secrecy, but incredibly strong, the other weak, but nothing is hidden from him. As expected, Perry had no idea what that monster from the pyramid was capable of. There is nothing interesting in the second, as if he was deprived, and his older, secretive brother received the best abilities. Still, Perry decided to start simple, and, without thinking twice, chose Sphinx, because he had standard chips and the choice would not be so difficult. As expected, there are only 2 abilities, and no one should expect immortality. The Sand God did not justify his powers. The second Guardian did everything for him. But such abilities could surprise even Perry himself. These abilities did not seem so useless. You can make a choice. One moment away from a new power that will give him many opportunities in the future, such as putting a seed into his lands so that greenery will sprout. A giant ball shone in front of Perry with this power, but only one ability. But suddenly, something went wrong. That balloon burst, which means that the absorption is not so ideal. The hero was plunged into thought about what happened, where his new ability was, why that sphere burst. This was exactly what was swirling in his head. It was a mistake. Not one ability was absorbed. What happened? Our hero probably didn't have any choices in the first place. That's the thing. The ability was incomplete, which became a problem. Yet the absorption was also not ideal. Why such a luxury? There was nothing to worry about. There was still a choice for a stronger guardian. And besides, you can always develop your strengths and capabilities. Even now, fate itself does not give the right to choose. All that remains is to choose a mysterious guardian who must have many trump cards with him. Incredibly, of all the talents, only 2 were known that this monster could hide in his pyramid. Perry considered this guardian to be the strongest in his experience, since he had more than 20 skills, what he could be capable of, and how Rose was able to get a crystal with such a monster. Only 2 abilities were known: Call of the Dead, which he used when absorbing the powers of zombies, and Soul Capture, with which he was able to take over Perry's mind. The hero did not understand that the Guardian, having more than 20 skills under his sleeve, was afraid to go into battle, even if these abilities could be useless. Another absorption of abilities must work now, otherwise what was the purpose of all this? A large ball with power formed again. What was waiting for our hero here? What a surprise it would be. And here comes the success. The ability to capture the soul was absorbed. It was so strong that it could affect the mind of Perry himself, even after rebirth. This talent was a real rarity, which means that everything was not in vain, to influence the mind. Thereby it will be possible to create illusions for the enemy and influence the 6 senses. The choice fell on Soul Capture. A red inscription appeared before his eyes. With such a rare talent at hand, it is difficult to imagine what he will be capable of. Perry effectively took the skill into his own hands. His gaze couldn't have been more determined. There was a large-scale release of energy. All the power was absorbed into every pore on the skin, into the muscle fibers, and strengthened the bones. The burst of energy was astonishing. A giant wave of light was sent out, increasing its range. This radiance warmed all the survivors. The citizens were happy, since the victory represented the release of freedom, as if a ray of sunshine had broken into their lives. Even the cowards saw that shine. Their thoughts were filled with joy, since their saviors were able to free all citizens from the shackles of the zone. The roar reached the farthest corners of the area. Everyone realized that they were freer than ever. Incredibly, the military headquarters noticed that very surge of energy. It was a real anomaly. The degree of danger was unknown. The headquarters reports that the cause of the release of energy could have been an earthquake, and besides, there was a giant pillar of light. The military had no idea what was happening there. The 5th group reported a large wave of mutated zombies. They demand evacuation from the commander. A stern military man, Colonel Steve, orders the group to stand to the end. No mercy, many civilians are under threat. The subordinate tried to somehow contradict, but it is unlikely that this will work on the stern colonel. As expected in this case, no, but only forward. Fate cannot be avoided in any way. The colonel's decision. The law. Steve was plunged into thought. That zone was the first of 7. They couldn't lose such an opportunity to study it, so they had to move forward. Meanwhile, a giant pillar of light cut the clouds. It was a flag of liberation. Our hero tried his best. The energy shattered like a mirror, and its fragments rained down from the sky. The entire area was covered with the pollen of this light, whether snowflakes covered the roofs of houses and the ground, pleasing the eyes of travelers. The light of victory, the northern region was freed from the influence of the great god. Everyone made a great contribution to this victory. Even the bandits brought benefits. Perry was already coming out of oblivion, which means everything is in order, and you can breathe a sigh of relief. The eyes opened slightly. The civilians were safe. The guardians were defeated. Only zombies could prevent the release. Perry once again amazes with his endurance. After everything they did for those 3 days, he was still standing on his feet as if nothing had happened. Suddenly, a familiar voice came from the side. The source did not understand what was happening here and decided to turn to our hero. It was Gloria. Our lieutenant should also receive his ability, which was causing her a severe headache. The hero shone with happiness. The zone was cleared. They were safe and they could get out of the area. Gloria's head was pounding. She remembered how Perry was taking control and he could not do anything. But he calms him down, saying that thanks to them, he is still standing on his own 2 feet. After all, they are a team and should help each other. This cannot be avoided. But it was just not calm because Rose, whom Gloria tried to call, was not nearby. Perry also noticed that their high school student was nowhere to be found. He silently began to look for the heroine around. She couldn't have disappeared so easily. Still, he found her. She was lying on the ground and was completely red. The new skill turned out to be too strong, and she could not withstand such pressure. Even the more prepared Gloria had a headache. Incredibly, she had a fever. Her body was fighting something. She was not feeling well at all. She needed emergency help. They understood that this was a clear reaction to the new talent. She needed peace and a quiet place. The lieutenant did not understand what was happening to her sister, why it did not affect them, and whether everything would be okay with her. However, she was very worried about her. She probably received a rare ability, and her body has not adapted to such changes at all. All she has to do is adapt, and everything will be fine. The police suddenly became interested in what ability our hero had. Perry named the name of his ability, but she didn't understand exactly what he was talking about, what soul capture was and how to use it. In general, she had no idea. He explained it in an almost accessible and understandable way, that this influence on the mind and its subordination in the future, in general, he could change the picture before his eyes. But he did not talk about the ability to absorb abilities, since it is not yet ideal. Even so, Gloria didn't understand anything. It was too abstract. It would be better if Perry showed his skills in practice. Apparently, the demonstration of forces had already begun. He had disappeared somewhere. Gloria was at a loss. Since it all happened too quickly, there was not even a mirage. Incredibly, he ended up behind the policewoman. She did not expect such force. If there was only one enemy, he would never be able to find out where his enemy was. But suddenly, he disappeared again. Only a second ago, his silhouette was behind him, but now he is not there. The ability was good. Just like that, he disappeared from the enemy's field of view, ended up behind his back. The enemy would go crazy while he attacked the silhouettes. She admired this ability, but it's true that it could have a lot of uses, since the effect on the mind is too broad. From the side of the target, it looks like teleportation or instant movement. So far, this is the only thing our hero knows about the new talent. Now he clearly explained, even Gloria was able to understand the meaning, becoming the first object for the experiment of the ability. Again and again, a new danger awaits our enemies. Once again, this is a new wave of the dead, who are already reaching out to the tasty protagonist. But Perry is not a fool to be attacked in the back by the bloodthirsty monsters that have recently been swarming in every alley. For the dead man, everything passed too quickly. He did not even suffer from pain. He died, divided into several parts. We had to hurry. After the liberation of the zone, a large wave of zombies was coming, which meant that it was not safe here. Gloria was frightened by what awaited them, while Perry explored how many dead people were already heading towards them and how quickly they needed to run away. There were many red dots before his eyes. The city was full of dead people, and the energy that was released outside began to attract the corpses here. Gloria remembered about the cowards who might be in danger, but the dead were attracted here by the remaining energy, and they were very far from here, which means they were safe. The most important task right now is to take Rose and protect her from the crowds of the dead. In the future, escaping from here would not be a bad thing. The lieutenant took responsibility for the high school student. Perry tried to persuade her to carry her himself, but suddenly something shocked him. Gloria's new ability or the zombies were even closer than it seemed. Incredibly, Rose levitated above the ground where this mysterious magic came from. Perry didn't understand at all what was happening in front of him. Rose didn't care so much that she was already striving for heaven. There was no way she could be allowed to die. The danger was over. It was Gloria's ability. She could control gravity, an incredible talent that everyone would dream of. It was like he was struck by lightning. Gloria's skill was amazing. When she can develop it to the proper level, then she will be able to control everything around her. This skill shocked even our hero. If he had it from the very beginning, it would have been much easier, since such a talent is of the highest level. The lieutenant considered Perry's reaction strange, but he pretended that everything was normal, and they had better go to the hospital to help Rose get out of this state. Even if there are herds of zombies on their way, they are determined to help the girl. Together, they will easily break through the danger and solve all the problems. Meanwhile, citizens fled the area, the dead were on their heels, and they could not answer such a crowd. The situation was getting worse and worse. The zombies seemed to have broken free, But being distracted by them was a fatal mistake. You had to run and just run. The zombies were reaching for fresh meat. They didn't need anything else, just to find a victim that they would devour. But people are not fluffy bunnies and can easily respond with their cruelty, since even a loved one who has become dead will be their enemy. Strays are powerless against an axe. No matter how sharp their claws and fangs are, a sharp blade and a strong hand will be stronger, which is precisely why a person is the fittest. The head of the survivors orders to run in the other direction, but how long will they be able to run from countless monsters? People were in a panic. Their life did not prepare them for this. They wanted a quiet life, where girls would run after them, but now herds of cold dead people were running after them. But even so, they found themselves at a dead end, who would come to the aid of hopeless people who were destined to die in the apocalypse. The situation became terrible. The dead surrounded them, and there was nowhere else to run, which meant there was no salvation either, which the head understood well. As Perry said, the dead were on their heels, and there were so many of them that the survivors could not even escape. They have already attacked the survivors. They just got out of the zone, and such a surprise awaits them in the form of hundreds, no thousands of monsters. He understood that he would die, even after so many trials when the zone disappeared. Meanwhile, the military defended their territories and fired back at the dead, but it was clear from their faces that this did not help them. A real horror was approaching them, which they would have to fight with trepidation. Now it is clear what frightens them so much. His face shows all kinds of despair. This creature didn't even take a bullet, it was too strong. The 10th group reported a unique danger. A mutated one appeared, and he was too strong. It was impossible to resist him. The military demanded help. Support was needed. Otherwise, large losses could not be avoided, since the creature was too dangerous. Steve asks to describe this dead man, promising that reinforcements will arrive as soon as possible. Everything only got worse. The connection was lost, which meant that the group would soon be dead. Colonel Steve understood this, and he had to do something. The colonel's order, the 5 strongest are sent to the battlefield with him. We are moving forward now. The subordinate is worried about Colonel Steve, as it was too dangerous on the front line. A military man is meant to sacrifice his life. Every soldier has now put his life on the line, and our Colonel Steve is not going to sit behind the backs of the real heroes who are now at the front. The order was given. Everyone got into their cars and moved towards the most dangerous enemy they had encountered. Meanwhile, the strays also bothered the civilians. They moved in crowds and overwhelmed them in numbers. They did not want to die. They still had the fire of life. But the dead were not alien to morality and mercy, which was their worst feature. The head of the group of citizens blamed himself for not being able to bring everyone out of this abyss. Now he could only apologize to them and nod his head, in order to retreat into his mind. Suddenly, a strong explosion sounded to the side. The head was in shock, but this could mean salvation for them. Suddenly, his fear disappeared. He was surprised that a giant explosion had passed nearby, which could have been his salvation. Luck was on their side. The culprit of the explosion was the person at whom everyone pointed the finger. It was definitely a salvation. This silhouette in the clouds of smoke and dust was very similar to someone. It was a swordsman who was capable of cutting down vehicles. Incredibly, the strongest evolved man in the world came to the survivors. Who could be better than him? This is real happiness for those who a minute ago were on the verge of death. The head recognized him and would have recognized him among thousands of similar ones now, and the tears on his cheeks dried up, and hope shone in his eyes. Yet the monsters do not care what danger is moving towards them. Their bloodthirstiness and hunger have blinded them so that they do not see anyone in front of them except victims. The head of the survivors managed to save his comrade by killing the annoying monster that gives no rest to anyone. The guy was on the edge of a cliff, but his leader will never be the one who throws his partner off. He will give him a hand and pull him out of any trouble. Here is the joy on their faces. They were saved by our hero. Only with his appearance can he give hope for a bright future. By that time, the dead did not want to run to the side. Their thoughtless movements were amazing. They went where their feet took them. Instinct forced them to go to the victims. The swordsman walked towards them. Each stray will receive what he deserves, preparing to lie down in the coffin. Incredibly, he decided to use his new skill. Finally, it will be possible to see it in action and use it in practice. She acted. Even the non-intelligent dead were afraid of Perry. He instilled in them a frightening nightmare with which they lost hope of life. The survivors, whether struck by lightning, could not believe their eyes. Zombies cannot be afraid. How is this possible? How strong is this eccentric? These are the thoughts that come to their heads. The dead were powerless under his influence. They froze like statues and awaited their fate. Death was already waiting for them in its afterlife. The hero of the future was completely confident in himself. The victims were immobilized, which means it would be much easier to kill them. His speed amazed everyone. They were speechless because he left only mirages behind him, which was hard to even notice. Still, someone was afraid to notice him, but he was unlikely to fight then. In those moments, he should have chopped up every dead man and made an appointment for everyone with the rotten devil. As it turned out, the heads and body parts of the dead were flying in different directions. No one could do anything for our hero. The ability is really not bad, since cutting motionless targets is much easier than cutting insane corpses. The survivors rejoiced. They did not know what to call him and decided to call him a swordsman, which Perry himself did not like. He asked them not to call him a swordsman. It would be better to call him by name, but they were very delighted and did not even listen to his requests, because he wanted to say everything that was on his mind. Even now, he did not call him by name. The man wanted him to take them with him. Otherwise, they would definitely not survive even until tomorrow, and they needed salvation. Such decisions need to be made by the whole team. This surprised the man, since he thought that our hero was fighting alone. Meanwhile, the dead did not retreat, and even walked with a confident step to devour every person here. There was no fear or pain in them. Ideal warriors who have one nuance: they will never listen to anyone and will fight only and only for themselves. But their pressure was interrupted by a sudden car. There was no need to walk in oncoming traffic. They should look left and right and not count crows. There was a big explosion. Who is this new warrior of salvation, who is able to throw cars and thereby terrify enemies? The dead were crushed by cars, and later the entire transport took off again. Is our lieutenant really capable of this? Controlling gravity is a very useful talent. The guys couldn't believe it. Some kind of devilry was happening around. Cars were flying, the dead were dying instantly, and their savior was disappearing due to his speed. She was incredible. Gloria was like a goddess descending on mortal sinners. Because of this, the men were scared. She was floating in the air, and piles of metal were flying behind her. They were horrified. The girl is beautiful, and she also controls gravity. And Perry must be incredibly strong for such a goddess to be his partner. In their eyes, Perry and the girls are superheroes, on whose shoulders lie the fate of millions of people, and their strength is capable of moving mountains. Finally, she descended to the ground. Such a skill can destroy cities. As soon as it is developed to the proper level, earthquakes will become commonplace for her enemies, and cracks in the ground will become a coffin. Also, such power had one drawback: large energy costs, which would take a long time to be replenished. Her strength left her. Gloria threw Rosa out of her influence and handed it over to Perry. Still, she could not live up to the expectations that were placed on her. The policewoman did not turn out to be the strongest on the team. You still had to get used to such power, otherwise the energy would always be wasted just as quickly, and someday there would be no one to catch Rose. By that time, the military was shooting back at the dead. They tried to spend every bullet wisely, but someday it would be useless. This time has come. They can still wound ordinary zombies with ordinary bullets, but this will no longer kill mutated ones, which means they need to become stronger. The military also understood that against these creatures, bullets were like a tickle, each one flying away from them, even if they were made of steel. Enough time has already passed, and it was enough for the dead to receive protective shells and exoskeletons. The guys were already shooting out of desperation. They had no hope of survival, since the fear of these creatures killed everything inside the people. Such modifications were extremely dangerous. Wide mouths, shells on their arms, and unquenchable rage. This is how monsters should be. His eyes shone like candles in a temple. With a smile like the devil, he said that he was doomed to him, so emptily, as if he had sold his soul to this creature. They definitely couldn't be killed with bullets. Only escape would save their incredibly valuable lives, so they had to run away without looking back. At this rate, they will all be killed, and the herd of mutated zombies will be chopped up. It will even be impossible to retreat, since the creatures were much faster due to their modifications. One bite and the military said goodbye to their legs. They were cracking nuts. People were losing their last hopes. Their loved ones and relatives had no one else to wait for, and yet it was almost impossible to escape from bloodthirsty monsters, since they were always one step faster. There are even fat people. Their mass exceeded the boundaries. There was much more hunger, and they ate more fresh flesh. The soldiers tried their best, but they could only hope for help from above, since there was no hope even for their machine gun. It can't be. They chewed through metal. Weapons broke under the pressure of powerful jaws and sharp teeth. Nothing could stop them. There was complete horror happening all around. The apocalypse became a big horror film that I would really like to rewind to the happy ending, so as not to see these wide mouths, flesh, and blood that fills the entire screen. The soldier saw death in front of him. thick death, which was ready to swallow his soul and satisfy his hunger. Well, today this monster is not destined to eat. The blade pierces him through. Now it is he who will face his death, which awaits him with a plate of soup and pie for dessert. Our hero arrived on time, just a few more moments, and the guy could go to his great-grandfathers and convey his ardent greetings to them. The soldier grabbed his head and could not imagine what kind of monster stood in front of him to kill such a large creature with one swing of his sword. Perry was looking for the military and just found it. But the number of dead people did not decrease, and right now they are behind him. From the side, someone asks Perry to get out of the way. Probably Gloria came to the rescue in order to put a couple of corpses under the wheels. The guy didn't even have time to say a word, and he was snatched from the hands of death, since a much greater danger was approaching them, which was allied. The policewoman surpasses herself time after time. She is able to drag vans with oil with her talent to kill even more monsters. Explosion after explosion, disaster after disaster, the dead fell in hundreds as soon as our heroes appeared before them. The boy did not understand what was happening before his eyes. A tank with oil that came out of nowhere, and a wanderer who could easily kill the fat man. Now he must see a real miracle. His snot is flowing for a reason. Now his heart must definitely jump out from such a sight. As it turned out, our heroine was already used to flying, and Rose became a wonderful seat which was very soft. The soldier doubted Perry, since he was simply good with a sword, and his partner could fly and throw wagons of oil at her opponents. Gloria even took care of Rosa and put a cooling compress on her. The military man despaired of such superheroes. They were truly strange, since they did not have a cape behind their backs and used their comrades instead of a chair. But Perry suddenly needed that same Colonel Steve. It was important for him that he was nearby. But the soldier was surprised that he knew him. The guy pointed in the direction in which Steve led the zombies, but just recently, there was a signal about a strong mutated one, and our fearless colonel wanted to take on him. Perry decided to look at the number of monsters and whether there could be monsters even stronger than ordinary ones. Among the small dots, there was one big one. The colonel was there. It was with this creature that he fought. Perry noticed this zombie. It was special, just in the direction the military man pointed to. He understands that Steve is well trained, but he is not yet able to fight a special zombie. He won't have enough strength, and there will be another death. Perry asked Gloria to take charge of everything here, and he would hurry towards the colonel, so he rushed to help achieve his goal. Steve won't be able to take all the glory for himself. The soldier did not understand at all what was happening here. They were all so strange and performed such miracles that his mind became cloudy. Steve took the monster to a metalworking plant, a lot of steel piles where entry was prohibited. But the colonel was smart, since there were no extra dead in such places. It was not for nothing that he sat at headquarters. Steve was a righteous warrior who put himself on the line to protect his warriors. He understood well that there should be no people in a place where passage was prohibited, which means that there would be no zombies. Incredibly, this creature was truly dangerous. It seemed to consist of smoke and flame. Steve ran into a dead end without a drop of fear, as if tomorrow would definitely come. A monster behind him, an ordinary swarm of bees, would sting, and he would become smarter so as not to go into the hive. He must have a plan against such a monster, otherwise only death awaited him here. The zombie did not lag behind. It is not known how long this running would be enough, since it was not weak and would instantly ruin the life of this colonel if he took on too much. He probably should know that the gun doesn't take such creatures, but that doesn't mean that he's a fool. He's probably using a distracting maneuver so that this rot doesn't know about anything in advance. The monster lives up to all its expectations. It easily breaks down doors and bends metal with its incredible strength. This monster even had a mouth. It's hard to guess, since it consists of smoke that dissipates in the wind. Still, whatever plan Steve had, it was even some kind of trap for the monster. The colonel had incredible ingenuity. He was able to corner a stronger monster than him. It's not for nothing that a man is the highest stage of evolution, because he has a mind. Steve was not so simple. Perry should not have underestimated this old man. He would give young people a head start and show all the monsters where the crayfish spend the winter. Clouds of smoke hovered in the room. The explosion was truly strong, and the zombie must have received severe damage. So he showed up, emerged from the clouds of his smoke, showed his terrifying shell. It was definitely a special zombie. This cannot be denied. Steve was able to declassify this asshole. After he was able to remove the shell, the colonel will be able to overpower this creature. The second shell consisted of strong bone, which no bullet could penetrate, which means the shots would be useless. The cartridges ran out. The plan was good. But you can't always rely on weapons, and you have to rely on yourself. So he takes his knife in order to kill this rot in close combat, one-on-one, and be sure that it will not hurt anyone. His actions were precise and decisive. There will be no pity for the bloodthirsty creature, die or kill. This is the principle of a true warrior. Without its shell, the zombie was weaker. It couldn't move as well as before. It was a good target for the colonel. Expectations were not met. The sword did not go deep into the neck, yet Perry was right. Steve was strong, but not strong enough. The zombie didn't like this. He was furious. But only if our hero can arrive in time, there will be another dead zombie. He understood that things were going badly. The dead man was too strong to be cut into bone meal. The monster attacked him, but our colonel is not a simpleton to get hit. It is not for nothing that he holds his position, since he holds himself in the best possible way. Another swing of the machete, and again to no avail. Nothing can take him, not even the sharpest sword. Under the pressure of such power, Steve slid across the floor. He could do nothing against such a zombie. He lacked strength. If he were even a little stronger, he would have easily cut this monster apart. But suddenly, something horrified him. He looked down and saw a new danger. What a horror it was. This creature grabbed his hand. He couldn't even move. Such a terrible monster.